check this out. So I think I saw a bit of, I probably came to theirs first. Yeah, so I came to the African Liberation Day, no, Remembrance Day. There's so many of these things, yeah? Remembrance is different from Liberation Day. Yes, I came for the first time. I was very impressed. I enjoyed it. And I told him, you know something? I've been thinking about this, but if you don't mind me, since we're a very intimate audience in here, people know that I do a lot of events. And this year, now, I'm trying to cut it down. And more so because I am looking to go to Ghana. So I haven't really locked down things for next year. But also, I decided that I'm going to put it out there to the Lord what I need to do or not. Because it's like, kwaku, one event, I get all this, I'm doing events. So I left this and I let it brew. And I put a fleece. And the fleece gave the opening for me to have this event. So once I was going for it and I got the date, I contacted him. And also I seen Adotey at the same day, I seen him at the reparations march Brixton. So I think I mentioned it to him. So those were the first two people I contacted. Then there was Jackie. I'm not sure if I saw Jackie at the reparations march thing, but she was a lawyer. She's very much involved in the Windrush thing, so I really wanted her on board. She's flitting between two programs. I hope she does make it. But anyway, to cut a long story short, I'm glad it's happening. And my brother here, I want to say that because I'm into history, I really enjoyed the presentation. But you may have had a slip. You said the Africans that came from Nova Scotia, it was the Africans that fought on the British side rather than the American side. Am I not right?
Yeah, they fought on the side of the British.
Yeah, you missed. I think you said the American side.
No, you said in the war in America.
No.
It was the war in America.
If you check the video, you notice I was quite paying attention. But because I'm to history. Yeah, so if you're watching this video, we edit it. If not, it was the Africans that fought on the side of the Britain during the war in America for independence. Yeah, they ended up abandoning Nova Scotia, which by the way is around Canada anyway. So,
and the ones, and this is very important,
yes.
Most of the ones who were then deported to Sierra Leone were the ones who were brought back to Britain and promised lots of freedoms and then abandoned on the streets of London and became the new Black Poor.
Yes.
Which,
another program.
Again, there was another panic.
Yes.
And then they were deported back to Sierra Leone.
Ridiculous, ridiculous, absolutely. And there, they've got this thing, what do they call it? The Black Loyalists. They form a core of Black Loyalists in West Africa. And so they say, it's not just Sierra Leone, because you know all these borders, because it goes into Liberia. So you have people who say they are Liberian, but their foreparents come from Sierra Leone. You have people who say their parents come from Liberia, so it's that kind of thing. Anyway, that's what they'll do, Mr. or Dr. Adotey. So you can actually they deal with that. Come here, everyone can see you. So can you come out, please? When you daydream me when I call Adotey, far from talking, Adotey is persistent with this idea and he's moved forward and they've got cooperative because he's interested in cooperating in the sense of finance, so credit, cooperative financing. Banks, credit loans, whatever they call. So that is Mr. Adotey, and he's got 10 minutes to give you a summary.
Okay, thank you very much. Good afternoon to you all. I know quite a number of people in this audience, and I know that therefore I will not begin the way I was going to begin. I was going to ask a question, but I know the answer to that question already because, as I said, I know the people here. The question was going to be, who here thinks that there's a need for African empowerment? And I know that all of you will say yes to that question. So really the issue becomes not that there's a need, but how to achieve it. And therefore, what kind of empowerment are we talking about? Now, I mean, to put it crudely, the way the world works at the moment in the system that we are locked into, the way to get rich is to own the means of production. There are many reasons why we are poor, but one of them is that we Africans don't own the means of production. Even in our own homes, we don't own the means of production. And so what we're trying to do is to tackle this thing head on, to say we need to own the means of production. And this project that we've been working on, this initiative, is trying to find a way to get us to own means of production. Unfortunately, we cannot do it directly because to own the means of production in a capitalist society means you have to have capital. You can't get away from that. So the first task we have to do is to accumulate the capital and then use the capital to get the means of production. And that's what we're trying to do. It's that simple. The capital will come through a credit union. A credit union is simply a group of people coming together to say, we will save a little bit of our money regularly, and then those among us who want to do business, i.e. own the means of production, own companies, we will lend you the money to do that, right? All that we are saying, we is the African Cooperative Union, is that the people that will be supported need to be people who are working cooperatively. Why? For three reasons. One, it reduces the risk to those who are doing the lending. It's safer to lend to a group than it is to lend to an individual. Two, it will help ensure future growth. If you support the sole trader, it will be hard for them to grow. But if you have a group of people, especially in a cooperative framework, it is easier for them to grow. So the future, you can have a big organization rather than staying as a small organization. And lastly, and not least, it will uplift the community as a whole, rather than uplifting a few people who become employers of others. Yeah? So those are the three reasons for choosing the cooperative. So let's assume we have this credit union, and now we start to lend money out. Imagine a situation in which you have got African recording studios, radio stations, Saturday schools, accounts, firms of accounts, lawyers, housing associations, architects, building maintenance, travel agencies, publishing houses, nursing homes, clothing retailers, African malls, jewelry makers, software developers, and so on, and so on, and so on, all plugged into this source of finance. Yeah? It will change our outlook, it will change what we can do. Because then, the political side of things, we can use the politics to get economic change. But then you can use the economic change to help to deliver political change as well. And this is what we need to do, I believe. So, the purpose of this is there are a lot of details about what we're trying to do, how we're trying to do it. Those are technicalities which I can answer if anybody else has any questions. So what we're saying is that if you think that this is a good idea, we need people to help us make it happen. We're saying help us, but really help yourselves. Yeah? Help us to do this thing. And what we're looking for, what we need now is people who will help us to get the pledges that we need. We need to get a number of people to say they will join this thing before we can apply for the license. So we need people to help us to get the pledges. We need people to help us raise the setup costs. We need to do social marketing. We need to develop our website. We are working with a number of people. We're working with the Trade Unions Congress, which is the black sections of the Trade Union Congress have been very supportive. Working with the African Caribbean students, they have been very useful so far. We're trying to work with community organizations and civil society groups. We're targeting specific sectors of our community and trying to get them to work with us. So this is where we are. We have a website. You can pledge on the website. I've brought some forms, but a number of people here have pledged. Those who haven't, please pledge. I brought some forms you can pledge. And we will accumulate those pledges. And in a few months' time, hopefully, we will have the numbers that we need. We will have raised the money that we need. And we will be able to make this application and set this thing up. As I said, it's something that is an imaginary, you can imagine it, but you can also feel the power of it, should it happen. So everybody who is willing to work with us on this, please.
Did you bring one of your forms?
Yes, I brought. Let me show you two forms that I'll show you. The form to pledge, I have a number of them here, right? Just ask you to fill your names in. we have been doing some research. We found this idea is, there's a time for ideas. Huh? So in the US, we found a group in Minneapolis. They call themselves the Village Financial Cooperative. They're doing exactly what we're trying to do. They've created a credit union. They've raised $1 million, right, to set up a credit union that is going to support African people to create their own cooperative enterprises in Minneapolis. We've come across another group called Africans in Boston, who are also set up a credit union and who are going to be using it for a slightly different purpose. They're not necessarily going to support cooperatives, but they're going to use it to develop enterprise. So we're holding a meeting on the 24th of November, and the main speaker is this woman here. She's Dr. Arikana Chibombori Kwai. She's the African Union Ambassador to the United States and the diaspora. And she's going to be speaking, and the African Union has a plan to try to get Africans to set up a fund which will then be used to invest in Africa. So she'll be speaking on that day. They're all going to be speaking by video link, but they'll be with us, yeah? So that's on 24. I have those forms to give you, and I have these forms for you to sign if you want to help in the effort to make this thing happen. But thank you very much.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, there. Thank you very much. She's got a YouTube thing. She does a bit of interview from time to time, so I'm sure we can send the links to you guys. So, feel comfortable. Right.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
Great.
Okay. On the program, I was due to come on at 3, but I'm happy to do anything early. So my name is Jennifer Obasek. I'm the senior partner at Obasek Solicitors, which is a law firm in Hackney. We've been based there for the last 14 years, and we specialize in immigration and property law. One of the things that I do is I also do some community-based programs. So on Ben Television, I've had a program called The Voice for the last 8 years. And I also run some NGOs. One's called Affirm Human Rights, which stands for Assisting Friends and Families with Resources and Information on Migration. And I started that 3 years ago. One of the reasons why I started the NGO is because I realized that when it came down to immigration, especially information and resources, the African Caribbean community was often the last to know about legislative changes, about also things that they could actually use to help themselves. So that's whether it's accessing finance or support through social services or NAF support. We just didn't seem to know that certain things were available or changes were about to happen. So another thing that we do is we do a lot of outreach, meaning we go around the country, and I mean the country from Scotland down to London, in doing surgeries, legal surgeries. And at my office every Friday we do a free legal clinic, and we've done that for more than 10 years. So if you know anybody that needs assistance, you can always say to them that they can come into our office on a Friday, thank you, and they will always be seen. We do have legal aid for family and also for housing, but we don't have for immigration. I actually gave back the immigration contract twice because the amount of hours and time that we spend in doing immigration work, they simply don't pay us for it. So you can sit down and think, there's a plane that's about to leave, family doesn't have the money, the client's in detention hasn't brought me proof of income or proof of identity, etc., that I'm going to be asked for. Before I fill out all the paperwork, it's going to take me maybe almost 2 hours really to get everything ready and forms filled. Then you have to look at the substance of the case. After looking at the substance of the case, you then have to think about preparing your drafting and your submissions, also getting further instructions from your client to verify. Then you have to think about if you need to get an injunction of stay or something of that sort. You then have to think about, okay, do I ask for an increase in what I'm going to get I haven't got it yet. Do I then try to ask for an increase or authorize myself to have an increase, run to the High Court, get it lodged, keep calling them, push it before a judge, try and get a barrister to sign off or at least give me confirmation on the merit of my legal argument? Don't forget, this is hours, this is time. And then if a judge says yay or nay, either your client has a successful outcome or doesn't. You have still incurred all that time and cost and do need to be compensated and paid. And it's only for, at times, the legal aid board to come in and say, well, you didn't fill that section of the form or you didn't have sufficient proof here and you don't get paid. So that's one of the reasons why I personally don't do legal aid work. I do private work, but we also do no win, no fee cases for the high cost cases. So these are cases where we see the legal merit. I know my human rights law better than most judges, I would say that, and I say that with confidence because I've been doing immigration law for more than 20 years. So when the Home Office sits down and says, you have a conviction despite your children, we're asking you to leave the country despite the fact you've been here for so many years. If we can see that this individual has a relationship, has ties, the offence was not so serious that their presence is not conducive for the public good, and the person can't afford to pay me, if I've won at the lower court stages, then I'm going to take that case where I need to take it, whether it's the Supreme Court or above. And each time that we've done that, we have won. We have won because we know the true merits of cases, we know our law. At Obasek solicitors, we, funny enough, do a lot of our advocacy in-house. What that means is it's people that I've trained that do the cases at court, that do the bail applications. It's only when we get, unfortunately, challenged to the Court of Appeal and above that we actually bring in counsel. And when we bring in barristers, again, we look for barristers that are fully seasoned, not that have fallen into immigration in the last couple of years, but we go for people that are fully seasoned. And that's very, very important. Immigration, yes, the Windrush scheme, basically, the Windrush scandal, if I call it that, it actually unveiled a lot of problems that were pre-existing for years and years and years to do with immigration. It was nothing new to those of us who were in the field. It was not a surprise. We knew this was going on and was happening. We had clients from all different other ethnic origins that were experiencing the exact same thing. Documents being lost, being refused treatment by the NHS, being told they had to leave their jobs. The only thing that the Windrush scandal did is it galvanized momentum. It galvanized exposure as to the unfairness that was happening, because it was happening to a large section of the community that were known to have come into the country to help build it up. But you're Ugandan, you're Nigerian, you're Asian person who's been here for 20 odd years or more, that have lost their documents or suffered with mental ill health, that can't find their papers, or that was brought in with a relative on a British passport from overseas that never got sorted out, is still in the same situation. There are some very important things, though, that those who qualify under the Windrush scheme need to know about. Number one, you can actually argue for your right to naturalization under the scheme, not just for settlement. The one thing that we always stress at our office is if you're going for a regularization of your status, you go for the best form of status, which is British. And we say that because that is what anchors you here. You don't go for a period of leave to remain. So if you know you have sufficient evidence to meet the criteria under the Windrush scheme, then you argue that you should be allowed to naturalize. You should argue for your British status. If your evidence falls short, that's when you can then argue for settlement, indefinite leave to remain. But in any situation, it's always best to argue for the best form of settlement. Going on from that, people who are just generally having immigration problems, you need to be aware of the fact that if you haven't made an application at the moment, the NHS fee is about to go up. Are you aware of this? It's going to double. So I'm warning everybody that if you haven't made an application, you're on the cusp of making an application, you're uncertain, please, please get advice speedily, because it's going to double. that might sound like, okay, what's she talking about? When you're making an application, you pay the standard Home Office application fee. You also pay the NHS surcharge, which currently stands at £500. The application alone does stand at £1,033. And that's for children, that's for elderly. There is the fee waiver scheme, which is available if you can show that you're homeless. Now, I don't know, but if you're homeless, it's hard to show you're homeless. You know, you want me to get a letter from whose house I'm sleeping on their sofas, that maybe they're renting council or housing association. They're not even supposed to have me on their sofas. You want them to give me the letter, or you want the church to give me the letter that's going to get another letter from the Home Office warning them that it's an offence to harbour an illegal immigrant. Even churches and mosques are getting warning letters from the Home Office when they write these letters of support for families that are homeless. So it's a catch-22 situation for a lot of them, which is really, really sad. So proving that you're homeless to get the fee waiver is important. Very, very important. Also, when you think about the fee waiver, in general, one of the things that we have been campaigning for is for the eradication of Home Office fees for the vulnerable and for children. What security checks do you have to do against children? Why should children have to pay that staggering amount of money for an application fee? Throughout the Western world, the Home Office fees in the UK are some of the highest, and also they act as a barrier to those who actually do want to regularise themselves. Think about it. I've been here for 20 years. I now meet the criteria for somebody who's overstayed. On paper, there's a provision, there's a route for me to take. But I've now got to continue to feed myself, stay sane, and also get the evidence. I must show, I think it's about 2 to 3 pieces of evidence for every year I've been in the country. So I've got to go through all my bags, all the places I've stayed, I'll go and ask people that have been sleeping on their sofas to please give me those letters, correspondence. They also look for third-party correspondence, which is hard to have if you're homeless, again. And then present all of this with the money to the Home Office. The fee waiver is not automatic. It's not automatic. So people, as I say, who are vulnerable, and children, it's so important that if you can, that you do contact your MPs to say, look, if you're going for the next election or if you want to stay in your office, you must be helping my community because this is actually adversely affecting us really badly. You know, you've got to be saying that you're going to be supporting this. Some of the other changes, you've got to think about Brexit. Those of you who are here, okay, you've got a question. But those of you that are here that may be from another European country thinking, okay, why is she talking about this? This is about, you know, people who want to go back to countries of origin. The fact is, if you're here from a European country and you have dependent relatives that want to come in to see you, before that Brexit door closes, if you're sending money back home regularly to somebody who you are maintaining, you might want to invite them to come in as your dependent before the Brexit door closes. Britain leaves officially in March. There will be a transitional period. There will be a transitional arrangement. There will be a transitional deal. But we don't know what's in these will-be's. So right now, whatever you need to do, and do it well. So that means if you're supposed to be applying for settlement with you and your family, do so. If any of your dependents need to also apply, make sure you give them the support to do so. We find that a lot of the relationships within European families sometimes break down. People come in thinking it might be easier for them to live in the UK, only to realise actually it's quite stressful. There isn't the work-life balance that they might have had in the Netherlands or wherever they're coming from. And then there's the housing cost and the housing problems. And then there's the social issues. So a lot of families kind of implode under the pressure. So dependent relatives kind of fall out. Then they realise, okay, it's 5 years. After the 5 years, I need to go back to whoever I've been arguing with that brought me into the country and say, look, you need to give me the supporting documents so I can still, you know, apply for my settlement. And if the relationship is strained, sometimes that's not always easy to do. But if you're in that situation, please, again, try and make sure your dependent relatives are sorted so that you can make sure that post-Brexit, you are stable. But when we think about those of you who may be thinking, okay, look, that's all well and good. Britain and its Brexit can sort itself out, but me, I'm looking back home. And back home, maybe the Caribbean, maybe Africa, maybe wherever it is. Two things. One, I've talked about making sure that you sorted your status here. So whether you've had indefinite leave to remain, know that if you haven't gone on to sort out your naturalisation, you leave the UK 2 years, that's gone. And you can't sit down when it's not working for you, or when it's working for you, thinking you can just hop back into the UK. You've got to make sure that before you think of progressing anywhere else to go and sow new seeds, that you're anchored and rooted here so you can come back at any time. So very important that you do progress your status to one of naturalisation so that you can come in and out at any time. The other thing is, if you're not going to go out for such a long period, to come in and show that this is your primary place of residence. You don't want to fall into argument with the Home Office, so why not just sort out your naturalisation before going? That's a very important thing. Another thing that you might want to do is also think about whether you are entitled to having dual nationality. It's not every country that allows it. So if you're going to maintain your British passport and the passport in the country where you also have ethnic ties or roots that you want to acquire, then you've got to know that it's permitted. You don't want to be caught out or caught up halfway between flights being told, look, you've got to choose, and have any other issues like that. So that's another factor. When you also go into the country where you're going to sow your new seeds, you might want to register with the British Embassy. Why? Natural disasters, any issues, you want them to come, you want those HM helicopters to come and know that you're there and get you out. It's a fact. You don't want to start saying, well, where's your passport? Why you have you registered? You don't, or when all that's going on in crisis, no, you want to just make sure that your dependents are registered where they need to be registered so that you're identifiable. Now, when I talked about going for advice and people being seasoned, and us only going to barristers that are seasoned, it is so important.
1 minute.
Thank you. Number one, if you're going to a lawyer, you make sure that lawyer is a specialist in immigration law, not just fell into it in the last couple of weeks, months. You want somebody who has at least 3 years post-qualification experience so they can call themselves an expert. Number two, you want to make sure that person is registered with a professional body. There are many good do-gooders in our mosques, in our churches, in our communities, but you want somebody that is actually accountable, not just to your pastor or to your imam. You want somebody that's accountable to the regulated professional body. You want to make sure that person has insurance. Too many times I've seen people saying, I gave all my documents to the lawyer, then the office closed, or the lawyer lost my documents. No, that person needs to be insured so that your case file is also got some level of protection, okay? And number four, you've got to make sure that person accounts for their retainer with you, i.e. tells you what service they're going to do for you and how you qualify for that service in writing. No, just give me your papers, I'll sort it out for you. You've got to have your letter of engagement that outlines what you told them, what they're going to do for you, how long it's going to take, and how you actually qualify, the legal route. The law has to be there, okay? You want there to be clear justification. Most people sit down, many I've heard, oh, I'll do a human rights application for you. And that's just nonsense. I'm telling you it's nonsense. You must have your letter of engagement which outlines those things that I stated so that there's clear instruction and accountability. Okay? Now, I'm going to be around. I'll be happy to answer questions, especially with regards to nationality, because that's what I came in prepared to do. And if you have any other issues surrounding immigration or legal matters, please feel free to come and tap me on the shoulder. Thank you.
That situation, which is good character.
Yes.
So, I'm speaking as a lay person. I believe that your blogs from East London, that Cockney guy, who's always been British and had no other nationality, can't be deported. But if I've got dual nationality, there's a possibility of being deported, even though I carry a British passport. Am I correct or wrong?
Well, you can be stripped of your British nationality, which is what you're saying. Yes, there is. If the offences that you've committed are so heinous, and so seen that your presence is not conducive for the public good. And that test, those legal tests, what means or what do you have to do that makes your presence not conducive for the public good, or to step it up for you to be stripped of your British nationality? And this works a similar way for those Europeans who have come in and they have said, okay, I'm a European national, I'm exercising my treaty rights, so I can't be removed. I've got children even. Those children have been here for 10 years, so they can't be removed. They will try and remove you if your criminal offending behaviour is seen to be not in line with you exercising your treaty rights or being here. We've had cases, but we've been successful on those cases. The case of European rights is a.k.a. Nigeria. That's one of my cases. I went to the Supreme Court, we won. This is somebody who had, it's a reported case, so I'm able to talk about it. There was a Netherlands citizen, he had offending behaviour, not a very serious offence either, but he had children that qualified for British status, but they still sought to remove him, outlining that his offending behaviour meant that his European rights were thwarted, breached. The offence wasn't that serious. He hadn't caused anybody any serious physical harm or damage, but it was a paper-based offence, if I put it like that. But they still wanted to test. Sometimes they push these cases to test the definitions, the legal definitions. The other cases that you can think about are cases that fall in the line of sort of terrorism. Many of our young people have been radicalised. Many of our young people who come from diaspora families have also been radicalised. So where they've come in, qualified for their indefinite leave to remain, and then they are able to have the dual nationality sort of status, the British government sit down and say, look, you've done things that are offensive to the British state. We want to strip you of that British nationality. Some of these young people are highly confused. The same way that it's easy to have kids roped into gangs is the same way kids are easily roped into radicalisation. So I'm not quick to judge, especially because it's a young mind being formed. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying I'm supporting any form of terrorism, but what I'm saying is when it's a young mind that has committed an offence that has been rehabilitated, and that's the quite important word that has to be there, rehabilitated, then if that person also has family ties, etc., it shouldn't be so quick for the government.
Much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Wow. Can you give your golden minutes? Yeah. You know something? I leave. Come on! Jack is in between engagements. So Jackie, instead of you relaxing that you have to come, but can I just say something? And maybe you can put it, spin into your presentation. As Jennifer was talking, I was saying, yeah, okay, I don't need this. I'm comfortable. I live here. I've got my British passport. Well, no, I forgot. Something occurred to me. I forgot it. What I want to say is that maybe we shouldn't be comfortable. Even a British passport should not make us so compliant and comfortable. Because I mentioned that stuff about having dual nationality, and there's a possibility of your British passport being stripped of you, and you got to go back to Jamaica or to Ghana. So let's be mindful of that. Particularly with our people, and not necessarily young people, that commit serious offenses. Particularly, I think, a year or more type sentences. You run that risk. So without further ado, I need to all the I've left out people to get on because all their websites are on there. I just want to mention Jackie because Jackie is actually going to talk about 3 things in the sense that she's been involved in the community engagement phase. You know, April, when this thing happened, they started forming legal workshops. She was part of that. I think they were the BCA, Black Cultural Archives. And then as a practicing lawyer, she's been involved in some of the cases. I think though normally lawyers don't always talk about their clients, this is a celebrated one. You know the USB bank guy, kwaku?
Yes.
Adotey. Adotey. Yeah, she had to, and you know they were trying to kick him out.
Yes.
So it's still pending. So maybe she can touch on. So her being a practicing, so a practitioner, so an activist at the community level, and thirdly, you know, the government put a lot of schemes. One of the schemes is a compensation scheme. So they're going around doing what I'll call road shows, having some consultancies and stuff. And I do believe that Jackie's involved in that. So she can talk on those 3 plans. So her thing is really to get updated so she doesn't necessarily have to repeat what Jennifer said. So it's about giving us the update of the Windrush journey since April. So there we are. Thank you very much.
Hello, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
So, did Jennifer speak about Windrush at all? Sorry, I'm late.
That was a
In
presentation.
passing. So, you got 10 minutes, so you can do what you can do in 10
right,
minutes.
okay, yes, I don't want to say what's been said already. I do apologise. I've come from the Windrush Action meeting, which I'll explain in a bit, and I've also have to leave to go to a women's event where I'm speaking on Windrush also, so I'm literally just popping in and then popping out. As Kwaku said, my name is Jacqueline Mackenzie, and I'm an immigration lawyer. I was an immigration solicitor at Bourne Pearson Partners for many years, and that's a major civil liberties firm that most of you may have heard of. It's done cases like, the Birmingham 6, Guildford 4, Jean-Charles de Menezes, and it's now doing Grenfell and Hillsborough. So it's quite a well-known firm. But about 8 years ago, I set up an immigration firm, an immigration consultancy, and I only do immigration and migration work. So Jennifer's point is a really valid one about making sure people have some level of expertise if you're going to go to them, because on my high street there's lots of firms that do immigration and they do welfare and housing and crime and a bit of everything, and then when you meet them at meetings, local Chamber of Commerce meetings or the business improvement development meetings, and you ask them the most fundamental question about immigration, they can't really answer it. And it's because, obviously there's nothing wrong with their intellectual abilities, but they're spreading themselves too thinly. And the problem with immigration law, it's huge. When I started in practice, the immigration rules was 30 pages, now it's over 2,000. You've got to constantly keep up with your knowledge. And it changes. I mean, we have acts and amendments and statements of changes. And remember, a lot of people say to me, well, because I used to be a criminal lawyer, and they said, well, why did you give that up and go into immigration? It was a real heart-wrenching story, what made me go into immigration, which we haven't got time for, but involving Rwandan refugees that were airlifted to the UK, and me just thinking, my God, somebody needs to do something. Because the view is that immigration is the sort of poor end of law. You're dealing with bedraggled people. Why do you want to spend your life? You spent all these years studying. Why do you want to spend your life filling out forms for people to get visas and so forth? It's absolutely nothing to do with that at all. It is one of the most complex areas of law. And our sources are our local jurisprudence, but we've also got European legislation coming from the European Courts of Human Rights or the European Commission. And we've also got further international jurisprudence in terms of the Refugee Convention. So it's really complex. You're grappling all the time with domestic law, European law, and international law coming out of the UN. So it's complex. I also set up something called the Organisation for Migration Advice and Research in 2015, and it is only really, we do pro bono cases for people who are extremely destitute. At the moment, I have a preference for working with women who are destitute, so we work through women's refugees, women who are victims of domestic violence, etc., and who just can't navigate their way through the system or find the fees. That's our preference. We don't exclude men, but that's my preference at the moment. We don't have a website or anything like that. We haven't had time to do that, but we do have a Facebook page. And then I've also founded the Windrush Action Group, or it's now actually called Windrush Action. They didn't like the fact that Windrush Action Group, the acronym became WAG, so they dropped the group bit. So we're now the Windrush Action. And that's where I'm going to start my presentation, because I was asked to speak about Windrush. So it's been said, that the crisis broke about 6 months ago, mainly through the media picking eyes as British citizens and paying those exorbitant fees, or there was a cheaper option. We were helping them to go down the route of getting what's called a no time limit stamp. But around 2015, we started seeing more people coming through our doors. The reason why there weren't too many before, so the only sort of people who realised that they had a problem were the ones who went abroad and couldn't get back in. And that was because the airlines were charged with checking that anybody who boarded a plane had to have some evidence as to what will enable them to be cleared through immigration here. And so if you were from Jamaica, for instance, so you required a visa and you didn't have it, and you said to somebody at the Virgin check-in desk or the VA check-in desk, well, I don't need a visa, I'm British, and you didn't have a British passport, then that was the end of the story. You got stuck in Jamaica as Mr. Morgan, who you've probably seen in the newspapers, who I was with this morning. He's now on our steering committee. He got stuck in Jamaica for 25 years. And, you know, there's all sorts of horrendous stories. But what changed was when it wasn't just the airlines that were required to, you know, check what your status was. It was absolutely everybody. From landlords to schools to hospitals, GPs, universities, everybody became an immigration officer. And employers, the main ones, and employers were really scared because of the penalties. If you did, you know, give somebody a job who couldn't prove that they had the right documentation, and then they and then it went from having the right documentation to being required to have the little piece of plastic, you know, the biometric resident permit. So even people who had indefinite leave stamps in their passports, or who had their certificate of registration as a British citizen, were still falling foul because they didn't have the biometric resident permit. So absolute crisis all came about. I'm sure you're all familiar with why we got here, you know, the hostile environment. I know it's a cliche, but that's generally what it is. We know it's been going on for much longer than the period of the scandal. We know it cuts across parties, political parties, you know, without being party political. The one that's in power now is very bad with immigration, but we've seen bad things happen under Labour too, and when we had the coalition. They're all bad when it comes to immigration, particularly immigration as it affects people of colour, because there are different types of immigration, as you know. But we had that particular piece of legislation in 2014, which is what kick-started the big crisis, and then we were seeing no end of people coming in saying that their doctors were asking for this and their employers were asking for that, etc., etc. And that's what brought us to where we are at today. The problem we've got is that there's all these bits of legislation that preceded that bit of legislation, so going back to the 1948 Commonwealth Act legislation throughout the 60s, the 71 Act, which most of you are very familiar with, and the 1981 Act, which some of those conflate each other. And it's very complex because, you know, at first the Home Office said, well, a Windrusher was somebody who was settled here on the 1st of January 1973. And we said to them, well, what about somebody who came from, say, Grenada on the 2nd of January 1973, because they were still British. And then Grenada didn't exist as a constitutional entity because it hadn't been made independent, or St. Lucia or Dominica, which was 78 and 79. And they didn't know the answer, essentially. And what about children of those people, or grandchildren of those people? And then out of the blue, they then said, well, if you're settled, if you were here in 1988, you're okay. And they haven't given any explanation, but if you're here in 1988, you're okay. But that still doesn't help us, because there are still issues with second, third and fourth generations. What's happening? So at the moment, even though I would define myself as fairly knowledgeable about immigration law and nationality law, I couldn't tell you categorically, and I defy anyone to, who exactly is a Windrusher. I mean, there are some people who are very easy to identify, but there's a lot of people that it's not that clear. So when the scandal broke, there was a poor young man who got caught up in it and who died, called Dexter Bristol, who some of you might have read about, and he was my client. And that's how I became, or got to the attention of the Black Cultural Archives, when they were looking for lawyers to come and run surgeries there. Somebody just rang me up, because I had no dealings with them before. Somebody rang me up and said, look, you know, I suppose they just Googled immigration lawyers and said, would you come and do these surgeries? And so we went, you know, myself and a colleague went down to Brixton, and there were hundreds of people. And so I said to the Cultural Archives, well, are we the only lawyers you've asked to do this? Where are the rest? And they said, well, we put a call out for others, and then I put a call out for others, and still nobody else was turning up. Or when they did come, they were asking how much they were going to get paid. I mean, we're supporting our people. This is something we're doing for free. This is a crisis. And there were lawyers even then trying to find a way of making money out of people's misery. Absolute shame. Anyway, and then what happened? We started getting very fancy law firms coming along with gifts. You know, they had the pens with the name on and the bag. I tell you, I collected so much stuff. People used to leave them behind, so I just used to go and grab them, you know, and take them home, or take them to my office rather. And you know, and I thought, well, you know, at least they're here and they're doing something. I know what they want. They want the photograph, don't they, for their corporate brochures and their corporate social responsibility plan that they have to put into their annual report, and they'll put something on their website. That's what I thought they were there for. And then it suddenly dawned on me what they were really there for. Well, they were there for that, but they were also there for another reason, because they were collecting data. And they wanted to look at whether there was scope to do a class action, and then they would cream off, as you've seen with all these big city firms when they do class actions, whether it's the Mau or whoever, they take most of the money, doesn't it? Somebody was telling me, I don't know if it's the Shavos people, but there was some issue where one of the big city firms got involved in a class action and made millions and millions, and the people who were the beneficiaries of the action got £2,000 each as their settlement. I don't want to misquote.
2 minutes?
Yes, right, okay. So anyway, so they all got fed up of it, you know, because they probably thought, God, we've got to sit down with these mostly Caribbean people, and you know, they don't have this piece of paper and that piece of paper. So those city firms didn't last very long, and we did have to interject when we realised that half of them didn't know anything about immigration law. So one person, one was sat next to me because we were all tightly squeezed into a room, and one person from one of these firms was telling somebody, because when you announce that there's a surgery, all sorts of people turn up. They weren't all people who were going to succeed under the Windrush. So a lot of people who were just overstayers came along. And I actually heard one of these city slickers saying to somebody, well, don't worry, you just go up to Croydon, to Luna House, you know, the Home Office, and see if they could give you something. So I had to interject at that point. I said, look, I'm really sorry, but I did overhear that person must not go to Luna House under any circumstances, because they would be detained. And so at that point, the Black Cultural Archives Board told those not to come back. But then it was just us again. But what has happened as a result of it just being us, as difficult as it was and as onerous as it was, because remember, the people caught up in the crisis, rightly or wrongly, because there were various schemes. Remember Thatcher had her scheme in the 80s where you could go and fill out your form and get your nationality, proof of your nationality. And I remember I was a volunteer at the Grenada High Commission. I was a student, and they asked us students to come in, and there was queues around the block of helping people to do that. So generally speaking, the issue, people are absolutely correct when they say we should not have had to apply to naturalise or get no time limits done or do anything. We shouldn't have had to do it. But the thing is, most people did. Yep. Because if you want to travel or do anything, most people went and got it. So therefore, you're really talking about some of the most vulnerable people in our community who were left behind. Oh, and I had a meeting, and the Director General, one of the Director Generals of the Home Office, invited me in for a meeting and said to me sneeringly, when on a particular date about 4,000 people had gone through the task force scheme, of which 1,600 of them were Jamaicans, because by far Jamaicans are the biggest group. And they're historical, we haven't got time to go in, I'd love to go into it, but I know exactly why Jamaicans are the biggest group. But this Director General, Glyn Williams, said to me, you know, these people have criminal convictions, why is that? You know, and he was being sneering because he was trying to sort of put down the cohort of the Windrushers. And then I said to him, well, you know, once upon a time in this country, it probably still is the case today. It's very easy as a black person to get a criminal conviction. You have to go on the wrong side of the road or have a little spliffy of that back pocket. So he never repeated that again, because I've still seen it in lots of meetings, and he hasn't actually brought that up. However, there is an issue about the cohort who have had to go through the scheme. There are people who are in prison, there are people in mental health institutions. Interestingly, lots of people who are in care homes have breakdown of the family when their children arrive from the Caribbean, all sorts of problems. So we're dealing with a very vulnerable group, and that's why it's really quite sickening to see that lawyers have been trying to profiteer out of this. Really, really quite appalling. I'm going to have to leave out a lot of what I was going to say, but just to say to you that what's happening now. So I ended up with this database of about 500 windrushers, and I suddenly thought, well, we've got to do something with this, haven't we? So I founded what, as I said, was called the Windrush Action Group, but I've given them autonomy now. They've got their own steering committee, and they dropped the G. So they're the Windrush Action, and I'm just helping. I was, secretary to it.
Hold on.
So
Executive action. We're supposed to have a plenary, but I'm mindful that probably if I gave Jackie a bit more time, because some of what was supposed to come to plenary may be set by her, and we've got a couple. So
just 2 minutes, maybe.
No,
just 2 minutes.
But I want to make sure that you touch on what you wanted to touch on. So
Right.
I'll give you 3 minutes.
Okay. Sorry, I could talk for England on anything. Of Africa on everything. So we've now got the Windrush Action, and it's got about 500 members. I've actually employed somebody to deal with it. It's because it's just so much work, and we've been helping people fill out the forms, all sorts of problems, because Sanjay Javid has said, if you've got criminal convictions, you're not getting this, that, we're fighting that. There's a lot of work to do, and we're actually cleaning the data, because not everybody on that list is actually somebody who would be defined as a windrusher within the constraints or the constructs of what we think that means. But we think the final figure is going to be, the figure at the moment is going to be about 360, 370, and we're adding every day almost we get a new person. And we brought in some advisors. So this morning we had some advisors who are going to look at what really, because the other thing I thought to about myself is I'm also now on the independent advice group, the Lessons Learned, Wendy Williams, that's the Home Office initiative. Reluctantly, but I'm on it. But we're going to do our own anyway, because that is still led by them. We're doing our own. So we've got a couple of advisors who've come on board who are going to look at, did the Home Office carry out quality, what I think they call it quality impact assessments, all that sort of thing. How do we stop this from happening again? And how do we deal with some of the real serious problems that we've got alongside Windrush? Somebody mentioned kwaku at well, we picked that case up right at the very end, and it's tough, because he's gone through spending over £100,000 on lawyers. In fact, over £150,000 on lawyers. And, well, I don't want to be critical of my colleagues, and I think some of them along the line have done some very good work, but he's where he's at. And it's crazy that, somebody who's not deemed to be a risk to this society, who's been out of his own country from the age of 4, living here since the age of 12, culturally British, is about to be deported. It's absolutely appalling. But he's a case celeb in a way. But what about all the others that you never hear about? Young kids who came up from the age of 2 as refugees, being sent back to Somalia and the Congo and places they don't even speak the languages anymore. And yet, we know that the root cause of it is that, there's a crime. They're the ones, when we refer to conducive deport, that's what we mean. People who aren't deemed conducive to the public good. And I know Jennifer touched on revocation of nationality, but I'm not going to touch on that. That's a separate thing. But we're talking about people who have spent nearly all their lives here and are de facto British, and for whatever reason just didn't send off the 1,000, how much pounds to get the piece of paper, but they're de facto British, really, even though the law says they're not. And we're sending them back to countries. I mean, I went with the Home Office actually on a field trip to Nigeria and to Jamaica, and I met with some of them, because I was saying to the Home Office, I was in a different role. I was on the secondment as a chief executive of a charity that was looking after foreign national women in prisons in the UK, and then we extended it to men. And we were finding that lots of Jamaican women, as it was then, the biggest group were Jamaican, but now that's not a big group. The biggest group now are Nigerian, Ghanaians, Vietnamese, and Albanians, Romanians, and Polish women are now the bigger group. But at the time, the biggest group was Jamaicans, of drug mules. Right. And they were coming in and being in the prisons, and then they were being deported at the end of it. And firstly, they suffered isolation here because they were just drug mules. They weren't people with connections to the country. They didn't know anybody. They didn't even get out the country. They didn't get out the airport except for in a police car. They were caught at the airport. And then what was happening to them is that they were going back to their countries and then having an even worse, because the drug dons were still after them. Or the poverty that they left, or the abuse. Serious domestic violence or prostitution, all that sort of stuff. They had to go right back into it. So we kept saying this, and we had this mission, we had this trip to Jamaica to have a look, and we saw some of the conditions, and we also met young Jamaicans who had been deported and who were living in the most deplorable conditions. So it's not a joke when we say that we have to campaign against the deportation of our people. And yet, when it's one of the areas I found it the hardest to get any sympathy for, because they come in and commit a crime. Even the high commissioners, who made a lot of noise during the Commonwealth Heads of Government and got on the TV, but now you talk to them about wider issues, they don't want to know. Don't want to know. So I don't know how we get these issues on the agenda. I know Middle England isn't going to buy into it in the way it brought into Windrush, because it thought Windrush was all these little old ladies who came over and were nurses, and it was all cuddly, so they loved that. But they're not going to go any further.
Yeah.
The other problem, I mean, you know all about the separation of families through the ridiculous income requirements, which I'm sure Jennifer told you about. One of the things you may not have considered, if you are coming from the Eastern Caribbean, which is nearly every country, so if you're coming from any Caribbean island except Jamaica for a holiday, you don't need a visa. You just literally turn up and they stamp 6 months in your passport. Yeah. So what happens is people come on that basis, and then they don't know the address that they're going to. They know it's in Shepherd's Bush or Brixton, but they can't tell you it's flat 15, Tower Crescent or whatever. They can't give you the full, because you don't. Your relatives are picking you up at the airport. What do you need to know all of that for? You know what they're doing? They're saying, well, sorry, we don't believe that you've come here really to spend some time with your auntie. And so they're denying you entry at the airport. But because there aren't daily flights going back to those islands, and the flights only coming in the morning, people are being detained in immigration detention, sometimes for weeks, until they can get them back on the next flight. This is a serious issue because it's happening. I mean, I get the calls from the High Commissions when this happens, and it's almost daily. Almost one a day. And just last week, I won't out her, but one of the High Commissions who had a case and referred it to me, and it involved somebody who was quite connected in that country, so she was quite keen for us to get it sorted. And when I said, look, you guys have to go to the media about this, do you know what she said to me? Well, I'm actually a fan of Theresa May, you know. I'm quite a supporter of the So I know I've got to wrap up. So we've got some serious problems. We've got some serious problems. So the Windrush Action meets, and it wants to be a voice to deal with the racism of this that underpin this, to look at how we store the historical data of this struggle, because this is absolutely a struggle. I mean, it also wants to look at what our legacy out of this will be. You know, individuals will get their compensation, but what does the community get? I mean, by and large, the government did not understand how England or the UK would act to this. They were taken by surprise that England reacted the way it did, or the UK. But what it absolutely knew is that this community, who by and large, it's not exclusively Caribbean, but by and large it's Caribbean, and by and larger than that within the cohort, it's Jamaican. What it knew is that there'd be some noise, but there'd be no, or what it thought is that there'd be no real activism. Because we have no leaders, we're not organised around a particular faith group, we have no powerful movements or organisations, and it was absolutely right. So in the early days, there was lots of people meeting, wasn't there? There was lots of groups and lots of things, and we did some of the marches from Downing Street to the Home Office. We could count the black people on them, and the Home Office were looking out the window, so they knew. They read us like when they referred to us as low-hanging fruit, they knew exactly who we were. And so the Windrush Action Group, we're hoping as a voice. So when the media, when the journalists, who have aided us, and we're grateful to them, but when they move on to the next story, Brexit or whatever else is exciting for them, or whatever else will bring them the next award, we have our own movement to, one, deal with this, and deal with all the issues, so including people, everybody getting the status they're entitled to, compensation, legacy, historical record, all of those issues, but also widening out what exactly is going on in this society and in how our people are treated across a wide
spectrum of issues, not just immigration, but immigration is bad, but we know it's bad across housing and social services, the care industry, education, our young people. And so we're hoping to build something. The final thing I want to say is that you are aware that there's this Windrush consultation going on, and that's about the compensation. It's been extended to the 16th of November. I brought some of the consultation packs. If you've not filled it out, you must do, because there are some issues around it. You know, Sajid Javid, the Home Secretary, is still talking about capping the amount, and we're not tolerating, that. And if you've seen Patrick Vernon's petition, because it's not doing very well, his first one did, this one isn't. You know, Ryanair did, and you know, Mary Seacole on the pound note did, but you know, we need this one to do well, because there's two issues that we need to make sure don't happen. That there mustn't be a cap on compensation. And this nonsense about people with criminal convictions not being entitled to get compensation is just foolishness. You know, people are entitled, they're entitled, and they have to pay them. And we're going to make sure of that. So do something, because what's happening, I spoke at the Brighton Labour Party last week, and I was on the train with Martin Ford QC, who's leading the consultation independently, but aligned to the Home Office. And one of the things that one of the things that he told me rather, is that a lot of people, a lot of racists are sending in their responses. So they're saying things like, oh yeah, this is pretty bad, this Windrush, but look, they don't need money. Why do they need money? You know, and the Taxpayers Alliance are saying, well, hold on a minute, how much is this going to cost the nation? And so forth. We don't care. We don't care. So but to balance out those voices, because those people are, tell me, you see them, don't you, on Twitter and other social media, they're organised. We are not. What is wrong with us? What's wrong with us? We're sending in paltry responses, and some of us aren't even sending anything in. So if you haven't, please take one of these, and please send in a response. I'll leave them here, and take them, and it's online. So even though I only brought a handful, it's online.
It's easier and better.
It's online. So I'm going to stop there, because I know I've got an extra 3 minutes, and I know I've gone over that. But thank you, and let's get organised.
Subspecialties in ophthalmology. And we all train in one particular aspect. The common thing that we might do is cataract surgery, but essentially it's very subspecialized. In Ghana, there are about 49 ophthalmologists involved in the direct service delivery for eye care, and that's serving a population of over 25 million. And ideally, the minimum ratio should be one ophthalmologist to 250,000 population, and it's about 1 to 500,000, so it's very under-resourced. And the other thing about this is that 2/3 of the ophthalmologists in Ghana have actually got limited training. I don't know whether you're aware of this global initiative for eliminating avoidable blindness in the world, which was a partnership that was established between the WHO, the World Health Organization, and the International Agency for the Prevention of Blindness. And basically, this was actually launched in 1999, and the aim of it was that avoidable blindness should be eliminated by the year 2020. And the reason why 2020 was chosen is because when you're looking at visual parameters of excellent vision, you commonly hear the term 2020. It's actually, it's measured in foot and it's used in America. We don't use that measurement here in the UK, but everybody understands what 2020 means. So around the world, there've been lots of NGOs and professional associations and lots of eye care institutions and companies that have been involved in trying to develop programs that all contribute to reducing world blindness. Now, as I mentioned to you before, well, Africa is actually considered the region with that has the world's greatest need in terms of human resource development for eye care. And I don't know whether you're aware of it, but Lord Chris published this report on global health partnerships and the UK contribution. And what he's found, what he published was that in developing countries, and this was in 2007, he acknowledged that the most common thing that all the African countries talked about was assistance with the education and training of staff. And as I said to you before, the minimum ratio should be one ophthalmologist per 250,000 population. And in Africa, there are actually 636 ophthalmologists. So that's about half of the minimum ratio that's actually required. So because of this sort of significant unmet need for training for ophthalmologists and other eye care providers in Ghana, this was the establishment into which Moorfields was actually involved. And Moorfields, which is where I trained. I don't work there, I actually trained there. They set up a charity with the Lions Club International, with the West African College of Surgeons, and basically they formed a charity known as the Moorfields Lions Kolebu Trust and built a new eye centre in Kolebu in Ghana. Kolebu is a teaching hospital in Accra in Ghana. And basically they raised about £3 million with lots of sort of like charitable events, some of which I had to go on, one of which was to go to East London and do a talk where everybody talked above everybody, and I refused to talk until everybody was quiet, and raise some money, you know, just doing lots of different things. So basically, in September 2015, the new eye centre opened in Kolebu in Accra in Ghana, and so this next video will actually tell you a little bit more about it.
In West Africa, there are an estimated 2.5 million cases of blindness.
Can you hear it?
No, is there a volume control there?
Today's medical know-how.
Especially you see this external, for some reason they've got a problem. So
This is Kolebu Teaching Hospital in Ghana, home to a newly rebuilt department of ophthalmology, which incorporates and allows international eye center. Very cleverly thought out project designed to change the eye care situation in West Africa for good. The main purpose of the clinic is to provide subspecialist training to ophthalmic medical staff.
sorry about that, we didn't realize. Okay.
It's probably the dream for me come true that somebody will come out of the blue to propose a solution to some of our problems that we've been having for eye care industry. When I came here, I came at a stage when there were only 2 ophthalmologists in this place. I had come from a training which trained you to do a bit of everything. And I quickly realized that there are patients that I couldn't treat at all. Now, for the majority of those people, they just went blind. Those who could afford went abroad. And I've been doing that for all these years, hoping for a time when we'll be able to do everything within the country. And that was the stage at which Moorfields came in with this concept.
The concept of a specialist ophthalmic teaching facility for Ghana was dreamed up years ago and made possible by a collaboration between the West African College of Surgeons, Lions Clubs International, Kolebu Teaching Hospital, and Moorfields Eye Hospital in London. The concept to build a home for excellence in teaching the eye surgery techniques of the West in Ghana, a stable location in the middle of West Africa, and share skills in a partnership. Most West African patients cannot afford to travel abroad for treatment, and talented West African medical students are likely to leave the country seeking to learn skills and access technology, then qualifying as medical staff abroad, perhaps never to return to West Africa. So, a key strand in the thinking is training the talent pool of young medical students in Ghana. Once the skills have been embedded, doctors will train each other locally so that the skill remains in West Africa.
And that collaboration was quite important and rewarding because, of course, it offers some of us the opportunity to learn from our colleagues. It is an opportunity, I believe, that they have started experiencing, knowing what goes on in other parts of the world.
To train subspecialists in eye surgery for the whole of West Africa, and for resources to be harnessed to build this center is a good thing, and it will help alleviate the suffering of the blind people, not only in Ghana, but the whole of West Africa. And I'm talking of 360 million people.
Here is the building previously used for eye treatment at Korle Bu before the new center opened its doors. This ward was closed only 3 months before the footage was shot. Now, in September 2015, after years of complex development, the Korle Bu Center opened its doors for the first time. With generous support from the Lions Clubs International, the government of Ghana, the Elvis Croft Foundation, and many other donors, medical equipment has arrived, including operating theaters, which will be up and running very soon.
The key aim at the end of all of this is for us to go away and the whole system to be all running in West Africa, by West Africa, for West Africa. We are the catalyst that are helping this happen.
Moorfields Island was the first eye hospital in the world. And if they are able to multiply themselves, and I hope they will be able to replicate this in other countries so that the world fights against blindness will be successful.
So, the training in subspecialties costs money, and that's where you can help. Please give generously. It will make a huge difference to patients right across West Africa.
So what's happened is that Lions International contributed, well, the Moorfields Lion Korle Bu Trust, which is the charitable trust that was actually set up, organised a lot of consensus meetings, and we had about 3 in London, 2009, 2012, 2015, 1 in Abuja in Nigeria and 1 in Accra. And the most important thing about these consensus meetings was that we established what the training should comprise of, and we decided that we should have online resources, so people should have background knowledge beforehand, and then hands-on experience once they actually attended the training centre in Korle Bu. And the most important thing that Ian Murdoch, he's the real catalyst for actually setting up the eye centre in Ghana, and he's dedicated a lot of his time to public health medicine. So he's done lots of projects in Nigeria and Ghana, all over sub-Saharan Africa. Was that the training program had to be for West Africa, in West Africa, by West Africans really. And as I said, the subspecialist courses have got 2 components: the online component and then the hands-on with the practical skills. And I was very fortunate enough to be involved in the medical retina course, specifically diabetic retinopathy. I don't know whether you know, but there's an epidemic of diabetes in the world, and the greatest prevalence, the most increased prevalence of diabetes, and it does affect multi-organs, the eyes especially, but the feet, the heart, everything is actually happening in sub-Saharan Africa. And the biggest increase in prevalence, a rise of about 150%, is expected to happen in sub-Saharan Africa by the year 2040. So it's a real significant problem, and it's actually the commonest cause of blindness in people of working age. All right, so that's between the ages of 16 to 64, 65. So whilst diabetic eye disease was the last subject that was discussed in the first consensus meeting, it was actually the first course that was actually run in the new eye centre. So I've been fortunate enough to work with educators at UCL and an instructional designer to develop the online components of the course. And this is just an example of the medical retina course. And it's very interactive. There are assessments, and you have to have so basically it just means that once everybody meets at the eye centre, everybody hits the ground running, everybody's at the same level of knowledge, background knowledge, and we can just get on and see the patients and manage them and learn how to treat them. The first course that I did was with my friend, Dr. Kwesi Amasa-Arthur, who is a retinal surgeon in Kolebu. There are very few retinal surgical units in the country. There is obviously the one at Moorfields. There's only 4 in London. There's one at Moorfields, there's one at the Western Eye, which is part of Imperial, there's one at the Royal Free, and the 4th one is actually where I work at Central Middlesex Hospital in Brent. So it's quite a unique skill to have, and as you can imagine, if there are just 4 units in London, how many there are actually in Africa. So they have one, they have a retinal surgeon, that's Kwesi. He was born in Ghana, went to school there, but his ophthalmology training was actually in the Midlands, around in the UK. So we ran the first course, and the first hands-on course took place in the centre in December 2016. And in that course we had 3 candidates that came from Nigeria, different states in Nigeria, and 1 person that came from Kumasi in Ghana. And then the second medical retina hands-on course just took place just this year, July 2018. And again, we had 2 from Nigeria, 1 from Gambia, and 1 from Accra in Ghana. Now, I think I forgot to mention this person that's got the arrow on their head, which was an ophthalmologist from Lagos University Teaching Hospital, Adetunji Adenikan. He came as a candidate in December 2016, but by the time we did the course in July 2018, he came on as a trainer with me for that course. And that's the beauty of this actual project, is the sort of like domino effect that it has with everybody. And I'll explain to you the reason why. So I got him to do a talk when he came on the July course to explain what the effect of that December 2016 course was on his practice. And basically, he put it all together in this slide. Management of diabetic eye disease involves a lot of laser, a lot of injections, and some degree of surgery as well. And you can see that before the course, even though he was down to be a medical retina subspecialist like myself, he'd done very little laser treatments. These are just all the different types of laser treatments you see before. Less than 5, less than 50 injections, and none of quite a lot. But in the 18 months following on from the course, he'd done quite a significant number of laser treatments and quite a phenomenal amount of injections as well. And these are all sight preventing, sight holding type of treatments. They make a significant difference to people's well-being. And not only that, he went on to train other people, not just junior doctors, but other consultant colleagues. The thing is that when you're a seasoned older consultant, and I don't know whether this just happens in Africa, everybody thinks that everybody knows everything, and they never challenge them. They don't do that so much here in the UK, but I noticed that when I go to Ghana, is that it's very difficult for the youngsters to, the younger consultants and doctors to actually question what the elders do. And sometimes their things may be out of date, or they may not be up to date. And it's very difficult for them to admit that. But he managed to actually train other consultants in Lagos, which I think is amazing, and also taught them not just lasers, but also injections. And then this is him actually training one of the candidates in July of this year how to administer laser onto a patient. And the other really success story was Kwesi Ahmed, who was actually not even a consultant at the time that he came on the course in December 2016, and he had actually done no lasers and no injections. But since the course, he was really incentivized by it. He went on to do 1,000 laser treatments and 1,000 injections in Kumasi, and trained 6 other people to do the same thing. And not only that, he then decided to pursue a career in retinal surgery, vitreoretinal surgery. And remember, I told you there are very few in sub-Saharan Africa. he actually set up the VR surgical unit in Konfenochi Teaching Hospital in Kumasi, which is where my parents are from. And he performed the very first surgical retinal procedure. What had happened was that in Konfenochi, they were well resourced. They'd received a lot of money from the Himalayan Cataract Project, which is an American-based project, and they had all this equipment sitting in boxes, just lying redundant. So when he got back, opened up the boxes, got all the equipment out, set up the surgical unit, got all the lasers out, got all the scanners out, and started using them, which was a real testimony to him.
2 minutes.
And he's actually almost on my last slide, and performed more. To date, he's performed over 120 surgical retinal procedures. So what you can see is that if you train one surgeon, it might seem like it's just a drop in the ocean, but what happens is that they go on to train other surgeons.
Each one teach one.
Yeah, exactly. And what that happens is that when that person gets trained, they don't just increase their own surgical numbers, they increase the surgical numbers of the others around them, and it has a ripple effect. And if you look at the graph in the middle, the blue is the actual number of trained surgeons, but the green is the actual increase in the number of surgical procedures that can happen. So that's basically what I wanted to talk to you about.
Thank you very much. As you're doing this, come over then. Come over, please. I'm out to do the men. I'm out to do the men.
Them together.
Get out of the way. Okay.
All right.
After we should have done a group one.
I should have done a group one.
Thank you. Can everybody
Okay, thanks.
Sorry. Heard some very interesting presentations. And if you have any questions around those presentations, to remind you, we had Sister Jennifer talk about the whole issue of immigration, the work she's been doing, and telling us that we need to get informed. For those who... Yeah, and then we found out that actually it affects you more than you think. Then you've had, and it's not in any order, we had Sister Evelyn tell us about, if you think of looking to Africa, investing in our people and making sure, and it's astronomical the effect it has. You train one, the ripple effect. We've had Brother Adotey talk about this African Credit Union. It's not a new idea, but the whole idea that we can galvanize our resources. And then we've had my brother here, sorry, your name? Onyeka. And he talked about Afford and the work they are doing, trying to translate the remittances we are sending home, which is about $60 billion, into something effective. So these were, I hope I haven't missed out anybody in terms of presentations. And so have you any questions? I mean, we've had one, I think, was it Sister Cheryl, you asked a question about why is diabetes becoming such an issue in sub-Saharan Africa? Absolutely. And it's exploding from what you're saying. So maybe so that everybody can hear the answer, if you can tell people what is happening in sub-Saharan Africa suddenly that we're getting this problem.
In the developed world, in the developed world, the predicted increase, the world increase for diabetes is predicted to be about 55%. But in sub-Saharan Africa, it's 141% by the year 2040. And it's really to do with lifestyle. It's to do with diet. It's to do with lack of exercise. As I said, my specialty is in medical retina, specifically diabetic retinopathy, and in Brent, a third of the diabetic patients that I see there, a third are Caucasian, a third are African, and a third are Asian. So it's across the board. And whilst in the rest of the country they say that diabetes and the diabetic-related eye problems are going down because of diabetic screening, we're not really seeing that in Brent. So part of the management that we do is for educating and training the patient. So if you come to my diabetic clinic, I'll be asking you about your diet, what you eat, what exercise you do, what your last blood pressure was, what your last blood sugar was, your HbA1c. I want to know all of those things, and if you don't know them, I'll find them on the system. And then we educate the patients about it, because it's all very well zapping a laser at a patient's eyes or sticking needles in to keep their sight. But it's a bit like a patient who's got lung cancer that keeps on smoking. They're not going to get better unless it's a mindset lifestyle change. And we ask every single time about exercise. So it's really to do with lifestyle choices, diet, ready, fast food, all that sort of stuff. It has a massive, massive impact on everybody.
Great.
Thank you.
I would like to have a question to our dear sister there. The eye diabetes, because I do more this disease. Now Africa is getting this disease because I'm thinking it's based on our food, from what is from the Western culture, and the food are processed here and sending back to our country.
It's not just that. It's not just that. A lot of diabetic eye disease isn't necessarily to do with carbohydrates and sugars and things like that, but a lot of diabetic eye disease, specifically maculopathy, your macula is your part of the retina, you see things in fine clear detail, is to do with fat deposits in the retina. So if you ask anybody about a high-fat diet, that you will guarantee that you will find someone who's got a high-fat diet. It could be anything from having full-fat milk. Even if you're vegetarian, I have a lot of Asian patients who say that, they've got a healthy diet because they're vegetarian. But you know what? They're slapping on that ghee, which is basically fortified butter. They say they're not eating sugar, but they're eating jaggery, which is basically, it's literally just sugar. So any patient that comes to me, and the beauty of my clinic is because we take photographs of every single patient's retina when they come, and we project them on the screen, and we can show them that, that yellow stuff that's in your retina that's affecting your sight, and all that fluid and everything is because what you're putting down your throat. And they'll say, Miss Mensah, I don't eat this and I don't eat that, but when we get down to it, they are. It's what you're putting in yourself, how much oil you're using and all that sort of thing.
Okay, she said, I seem to be out of place with this because you heard so much about Windrush. And I said, this is important because Windrush is just one part of what we talk about. It's a bigger story. And you notice 2 questions have gone to you. So that shows how important what you're doing is. I think the last goes to you, Wendy. Oh, okay, there are 2. So Moses, right? Wendy, go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to ask about the exercise part of it and cultural attitude. Personally, I've experienced hostility from some women saying that ladies don't exercise. And I know that it's a very small part of the population that, people work a lot and they walk a lot, and those are the people who don't have a lot of money, so they have to. But with a lot of the population, it's a matter of you have a car, or the idea of exercise is not embedded in it. I'm just wondering.
Yeah, but exercise can be anything, exactly what you just said, minimum 10,000 steps a day.
But I'm talking about it in
Ghana. In our culture, I know it's very, very true, and it's an education thing. And I think that one thing, because I'm fortunate enough to be able to show patients what the back of their eyes look like. Not everybody can see the back of their eyes and the effect on the back of their eyes. And when I say to them, you know what, if you just do that little bit of exercise, if you just cut out that croissant that you're having every morning with the full fat milk in your porridge, and change it to something else, and then we then see the difference, 4 months later or 6 months later, that's what usually incentivizes them. And that's what we do. When we do the training in Ghana, they've got a fundus camera there, they've got a scanner there, they've got all the equipment, and that's what we do. So we did a specialised dietary sheet when we were actually there. We had all the local foods and everything like that. Yeah.
Okay. Before Moses comes in, I've noticed that people are packing up. Just 2. It's not everybody, so you don't have to go. They told me beforehand. There's another Windrush event in my part of London. Brent, Glenroy, Reverend Buddy, and Haja are going to that. But I want to say something because Glenroy and Haja, and indeed Nana, happen to be an organization, at least on the board of an organization called IDPA Coalition UK. IDPA stands for International Decade for People of African Descent. That is a UN initiative that started in 2015 and ends in 2024. So 1 decade of looking at how we can empower Africans. And in this forum, when we talk about Africans, I mean people from the continent and the diaspora. Right. But it's a governmental thing, and also civil society can get involved. So they are on the part of civil society trying to sensitize British people or people in Britain to this UN initiative. So Nana is going to stay. So if you want some more information, she, in fact, the secretary, you can get it from her. But Brother Glenroy, thanks for coming. Brother Buddy, thanks for coming. Haji, thanks for coming.
Thank
so the last
guys, you want to take photos of them before they go?
Okay, okay then.
Okay, shall we do the picture then quickly?
Okay.
It's done. Thank you.
We done the selfie?
I think it's coming back.
Yeah.
Yeah, just in case anybody's blinking, as long as you keep your eye on the camera lens, that's all I require.
We say, looking to Africa, or particularly Ghana, what are some of the investment opportunities and what's happening business-wise in Ghana?
That's a good question. I think when you say investment opportunities, the first thing you've got to ask yourself is, you know, what do you want to invest in? Is it a personal investment? Is it a business investment? Is it wanting to start a career here? I must say for any of those three, Ghana is definitely a prime spot to do that for a number of reasons. Besides being one of the most friendly countries on the continent, also a country that promotes doing business and really tries to encourage the diaspora to come back. There are a lot of really exciting initiatives, and there's a lot of good energy on the ground in terms of the next generation, building technologies, really interested in entrepreneurship, but on a more, I suppose, to a bigger level, if you like, there are opportunities in such a range of industries, so whether that be energy or real estate, agriculture is a huge one. There's a big drive around value-adding processes. So yeah, it really, I would say it's really about figuring out for yourself what it is that you want to do, what are your skills, what can you bring to the table, and then seeing where you can match that. I'm pretty sure that there's definitely something you can do here in Ghana. And even if you don't want to physically move here, you can actually make the right connections, set up a business so that you can work remotely. There's plenty of ways you can do that in tourism, for example.
Right. Once again, in terms of the moving, you moved for someone that's lived there just like you for most of their life. What are some of the steps or things that you've learned from that you may want to advise them on to be aware of in terms of making that move?
In terms of making the move, you definitely want to think about, for example, where you're going to stay when you come. Ghana definitely isn't cheap in terms of accommodation. If you've got family here already, or if you've got somewhere to stay already, that's usually cool. That's kind of how I started. Somebody that I knew had a place that needed looking after, and they asked me to come here. So that was a nice, warm sort of stepping stone for me, because I didn't have to think about, paying loads of rent and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, definitely accommodation is one to look out for. Also, in terms of income, you may want to still think about how can I still be generating at least some kind of income, perhaps from the UK, before I get here. Because if you're looking to sort of hit the ground running and money to start kind of falling out the sky, that's not going to happen. You probably want to think about, do I have some kind of an income that's able to support me while I build my network, build my contacts, which is why I would strongly suggest, and this is what I did, strongly suggest that you maybe have a couple of trips first before you make the move. Actually come, as you would anywhere else in the world, come, get to know people, figure the place out, figure out what it is you want to do, and then you can start to build and factor in how you can sort of manage your personal circumstances.
Okay, lastly, tell us your business and some of the things that probably us over there might be interested in terms of what you do with your business.
Okay, so one of the first things you can do if you want to kind of keep abreast of some of the things that are happening on the continent, you can sign up to our newsletter, africabusiness2020.com. It's free. We send out news every month. You can keep up to date with what we're doing, but also with what other entities are doing, and just some sort of general news and opinion pieces and interviews with really interested people on the continent to see what they're doing. We also once a year do a diaspora business mission into Ghana. So if you have an idea, you're really interested in coming into the country, but maybe it's your first time, for example, we will hold your hand and bring you over for, let's say, a week, introduce you to some of the people that may be able to give you more insight into the type of sector that you're interested in. You can also network and meet some people here that have made the move before, and also get to see the beautiful country that Ghana is as well. So that's the second thing. And then the third thing is if you're interested in particularly the tech industry, we are the founders of the Tech in Ghana conference. So we do that once a year in London and once a year in Accra. So we'll be back in London during London Tech Week, which is June 2019. If you happen to be in Ghana anytime in November this year, towards the end of November, 27th and 28th, we're doing the Tech in Ghana conference for the fourth time here. Well, the second time in Accra, but the fourth event. So there you have it.
And lastly, your thing covers Africa, so can you just speak?
Contact of mine called Dr. Harnett, who runs a very good website you should check out, africajumpstart.com, and she is a strategist and talks about some of the best places in Africa to do business, and she looks at sort of low risk and high opportunity markets.
Okay, so that's cool. She used to be in London. In fact, she used to write for the Void, New Nation. And indeed, she ended up on Choice Radio and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, so fantastic. Now, there's an African American family, the Christian family, or better known as the Bourne family. So, when did you come to Ghana, and what drove you to come to Ghana?
Should I introduce myself first?
Yeah.
Okay. My name is John Christian. I'm originally from the USA. The state of Connecticut, and I'm a vlogger, I'm a hip-hop soul artist, and you can check us out on YouTube. Our blog is Native Bourne Family, so that's Native Bourne with the E at the end. Check it out, Native Bourne Family. So yeah, I'm from Connecticut in the US, and I came to Ghana just for a change, you know. Back at home, we're dealing with a lot of the hustle and bustle. There's a lot of racism that's going on, you know, there's a lot of civil unrest, and a lot of us are feeling uneasy, you understand? It's like a lot of us are feeling uncomfortable, and at the same time, I have kids that I'm raising. I have 5 kids, 4 girls and 1 boy, and my wife and I, we always had dreams of, you know, being entrepreneurs, doing business online, and we have different goals, and when we was in a rat race, we just really didn't have time to do our passion. And it was just a struggle for us. And then on top of that, all of the drama that's going on in the U.S., and we felt pressure, you know? We felt a lot of pressure. And my wife and I have been talking a lot about come to Africa for some years. So what really made us make that move was my best friend growing up, his father's Ghanaian and his mother is African American. So his grandmother passed away. She had a funeral. She passed away at 110 years old, I believe. And he came to Ghana for the first time. And he was here for 2 weeks. So they're in the Kumasi area, the Asante area. And when he came back from Ghana, he was like, John, you have to go. I said, I'm telling you, man, they will love your family, man. Ghana's very family-oriented. It's a beautiful place here. You gotta check it out. I was like, are you serious? Like, yeah. Because my wife and I was thinking about South Africa first. But we was like, you know what? We did some research. We found that there was a bigger expat community here in Ghana. There was his family here as well that we could talk to. So we wanted to go somewhere that we may know people, you know. So that's why we chose Ghana. And that was back in 2013. We was here for 6 months. And then we ran out of money and went back to the US for a few more years. We got our grind on, kept on thinking about returning back to Ghana. So we just kept on saving our funds, trying to plan. You know, we set our intentions on going back. We didn't know how we was going to come back. But when the time presented itself, we had the funding. We made that transition back in 2016, and we've been here ever since. So that's how that went.
For someone that has no connection but feels like you did and wants to maybe make the transition, what are some of the things that you've learned that you may want to advise them or to be mindful of?
Well, first of all, they go to our website, nativeborn.com. Go ahead and check us out. You can send us a message through there. We can help you out. We know people around here, so we get you connected, what you should do. But first and foremost, you want to connect with people that's already here. And that's what we've done. Before we came to Ghana, we was talking to different people on Facebook that was living here already. We were just asking questions, going back and forth, making sure that we got enough information before we made the transition. So you want to get your network going on, you know, contact people and talk with people. So that's what we've done. So that's what you want to do, find out about the housing, find out about the visas, find out about, number one is work. Like, how are you going to make your money? Is it online business? Are you planning to work here? Understand that if you don't got like a degree or some sort of special skill, you may not get paid what you're worth here, because they don't, you know, the minimum wage here is not much. But if you have like a profession, maybe an engineer or a teacher, if you want to work at the universities or maybe work with the government, you get paid pretty well. But my wife and I, we don't have those things. We're just entrepreneurs, you know. We wanted to work online. So for us, it was a struggle financially because we've been trying to do our own thing, and some things got stolen. So you want to keep that in mind. Make sure you have a plan B. All of our plans was on our computers. I had 2 computers, 2 1-tier hard drives. I had 2 iPhones on my desk. And this happened at the beginning of last year, 2017. And it was on my desk in front of the window. And then when I woke up the next morning, I saw it gone. And I looked like, what the world? And it just clicked. We've been robbed. Somebody just popped over our window. So that's another thing I want to point out. Security is important because here in Ghana, there is a lot of petty theft. You know, you're not here in Ghana. When you're here in Ghana, you don't fear for your life, but you have to be careful with petty theft. They call it petty theft. So when those things take away from us, it just really slowed us down on what we was planning to do to make money. And it was devastating at the time. So we moved out of that neighborhood because the security wasn't great, and we went to a better neighborhood that had adequate security, and it worked out, you know, great for us. So now we're fine. We experienced that this second time around, so I'm grateful. So you want to look into those things, do your research on the basic necessities that you need to live here, and then take it from there.
Okay, you've mentioned some specifics, but I'll ask the question nevertheless. What are some of the other challenges that we should be mindful of?
Well, number one, the culture. You want to come to Ghana with an open mind. You want to come here humble. Don't come here with an attitude like you're better than other people. You have to take your time when you come to Ghana. So learn the culture. Learn how things work here. I think that's the most important thing, because once you learn the culture and you adapt, life gets easier and for yourself. So you want to come here, you want to do those things. Another challenge is, once again, money. How are you making money? Are you making money online? If you're making money online, then you have to understand how the internet's going to work here. Because they have different packages. They have a regular Wi-Fi device where you could connect via Wi-Fi, or they have a broadband service. And the broadband service is much better, but you have to be in the area to access that type of service. So you want to research where the internet is best at. Some people want to just come here and live a more rural life, like, you know, maybe live off the land. I heard many different things. Whatever you want to do research in that area and try to be realistic. You have to be realistic, because if you just over fantasize how it's going to be, oh, I'm going to come here and I'm going to live off the land, or I'm going to come here and start my business for the first time and it's going to flourish, that's not realistic. You want to come here doing the things that you have already done where you are right now. You understand? So if you come here and you're doing something brand new, understand, it may take time. It's not fast money here like that. So it all depends on your finances and what you're knowledgeable about. So that's what you want to do to limit those challenges. Those are the 2 challenges: making your money and making sure you understand the customs.
And lastly, you said you do some business, maybe helping people. So don't you plug what you do then?
Okay. Say that again?
Yeah, you said you do things like you help people who want tourism or to visit or travel.
Right.
So if you just want to promote what you do.
Okay. So yeah, if you're looking for help, you can go to our website, nativeborn.com, and plug in your email address, because what we do, we give out an email blast and we let people know what's going on or different services that's available in Ghana. We're connected with a lot of people that offer services. Like me, myself, I don't personally do those services, but I may know a few people that I can connect you with. So look at us as a connection to people who actually do that type of work. So that's what you can do. Go to nativeborn.com, give us your email, and we respond best in that way via email.
Yes. Okay, so this is his wife coming up. And as I said, they've got about 5 children. They've got fantastic YouTube. That's how I discovered them. Fantastic. Even as a Ghanaian, I watch it and learn about my own country. Yeah? So.
Yeah, that's cool. No, that's cool. That's cool. In Africa, the sunshine.
Can I just say what this is about? I decided to keep it in. The husband was saying like she's been like star wearing the glasses. She take a dark glass off. I said, she's really wrong.
Yeah.
Right, so how has life been in Ghana, particularly coming from abroad and also raising a family? Name first.
Hi, my name is Sophia Christian. I am a full-time student for media communications, and I am an author and blogger. And as far as how my life here is in Ghana and how I've been able to assimilate me and my family here, it's been a huge learning curve, but it's been necessary because as you travel and as you experience another culture, your mind broadens, your heart broadens, everything about you broadens and get bigger. And living in Ghana, it has taught me patience. It has taught me understanding about people in different cultures. It has taught me more about myself, the things that I love, the things that I don't like, the things that I like. And it taught me how to raise my children in a more humble way, in a nice way. But I want to be clear that even like in the States, you can get everything here that you get in the States in Ghana. So it's not, so my kids still have the luxuries of what they're used to experiencing in the States. They also have it here. So they're loving it. We're all having a good time. We're all learning together. We're all growing together, and it's been an awesome experience.
Okay. I won't drill down that a bit because some may have children. So what keeps people where they are as a family is like my child's schooling and whatever. So can you tell us the reality of maybe placing children in here in terms of school? I know there's some homeschooling stuff. So explain.
Yes. Okay. Well, for us personally, we have 5 children. We homeschool our 3 oldest children. It's just more easier. They're more easier to manage. Our 2 younger children, who are 6 and 4, they go to school. Our youngest daughter, she goes to a very nice daycare type of setup that's near our home, and our son, he goes to a school. And actually, his school is for autism because our son is autistic. So we'll actually be coming out with a video about even autism here in Ghana and the services they provide. But when it comes to children, you have to really know the needs of your child. And they have international schools here as well that will have the same curriculum that you're used to, depending on where you're from. I think as a parent, it's just important to know your child. It's hard for me to tell you where to bring your child or what's good for them. We had to look at our children on an individual basis, but we have been able to give them what they need on an educational level while here in Ghana. And they have teachers that work with them very well, are very patient with our children, very loving, very caring, very kind. And we've been blessed to find those schools. And as far as homeschooling, as long as you have an internet connection, we have been able to homeschool our children using websites like education.com, ABC Mouse. What's other websites that we use for the girls? Well, and just lots of reading. They have the library here. We go to EPP Books, I think it's called. And, we just have them do reading, and we don't stress it too much, even with education. We're not like, oh, our children have to be here or have to be there. We just want them to enjoy learning and have fun and just have a good time while being here in Ghana.
Okay. You obviously grew up in America.
Yes.
Now your children are growing up in here. When you're looking at them, what are some of the differences in terms of different backgrounds that you notice in the differences in terms of upbringing because you're in different localities?
Oh, well, upbringing here in Ghana, I noticed the children are very respectful. Like, they are so sweet, and honestly, in the States, you're used to agitated children, just like the adults. Even with us adults, we can get very agitated in the States as being from the diaspora with all the chaos that's kind of going on now. The children here, I notice, are more calm. The adults here are more calm, more easygoing. So I appreciate that type of environment. My children are raised like that, where they're not feeling rushed, they're not feeling pressure, they're not feeling overly anxious. It's more easygoing, and that character is beginning to show upon our children as well.
I know you've shown in your blogs, your video blogs, but can you give us because I've seen you go to the market and all that kind of stuff. Can you just give the reality of living here?
Okay. Well, I think it's important like I stated earlier, to know what you like and know what you don't like. Because, like my husband stated, if you come in here and say, I'm going to live like a certain way because maybe you want to live a local way, let's just say that, you have to know that you can do that or it will bring frustration. Certain people like live in a more humble type of lifestyle that's even from the States or from other places, and they feel comfortable, but other people try to immerse themselves in that and then it makes them run away. So I would say know what you like and dislike. So for instance, my husband, we go to a market and I have to be very specific about the markets I go to because I'll get frustrated if it's too crowded or if it's the open sewers, because we lost food one time that fell into the sewer. You know what I mean? And it was just drama. So I try to put myself in situations where I can cause less frustration in my life. So I would say to anyone wanting to experience shopping or, I don't know what I'm saying, to experience shopping or certain things that make sure you don't cause yourself to get more frustrated than necessary. Because there's everything for everyone here. And you just have to be honest about who you are and about yourself. And that'll give you the best person living.
That's enough for me, thanks. Okay, that's cool. I think we pretty much have covered what we wanted to cover. And I don't know, is there a comment or a question? Oh, well, there you go. So Nana, can I allow you to facilitate? We've got 5 minutes here, but first of all, can I thank you for staying to the very end? Much appreciated. Can you give yourself some round of applause, please? Thank you very much. And it's very mindful of this also happening in Africa. So we go to Africa. You're right, they look like us, but they're living a Western life and it's divorced and they're not integrating themselves. And yes, that can be an issue. You also mentioned the reality of where we live, in which the Ghanaians can be third-class citizens, in which Europeans, the Chinese, and you want to do a business, it's going to Chinese, the state itself is giving priority to them. So there's all these things that we have to look at. So it's a good point you make, yes.
Okay, Serwah?
Yeah, but you haven't answered the question.
Yeah, but let Serwah come in and then we'll, let me direct it so we can have Serwah, you come in and then.
We have to also declare that Ghana is not homogeneous. We can't, I mean, when you say authentic, what exactly do you mean by authentic? I mean, I know Ghanaians who were some of my classmates. They live in a particular way, and you can't necessarily say that it's any different from maybe this lady coming from the US. Maybe where they live, that's not where every Ghanaian can afford to live. So I think we have to be careful about what we mean by authentic. Because are you saying that those Ghanaians are not authentic because of the way they live? And she made a point that you have to be honest about who you are and what aggravates you and what doesn't aggravate you. So for me, I think that we don't all enjoy the same things, but we're all as Ghanaian as anybody else, or we're all as African as anybody else. Your taste may not be the same as everybody else. It doesn't make you any less authentic or any less Ghanaian.
Okay. Has anybody, in terms of, you've seen two experiences. There was the person who went from the UK and the people who went from the States. And remember that it's interesting that they found that in Ghana, if you don't have a degree, you ain't getting a good job. And that's their problem. So they're having to get educated because that's, and the lady from the UK, she made the transition for a different reason, different purpose. It's living differently. But in a sense, it demonstrates what you're saying, that there are, in fact, Ghana is a mixture. You can get and I can give you one example. Down in Peking, the Volta region, there's this vegan African who's moved back there. He's got this hotel that's strictly vegan, and he runs it quite differently, but very down to earth. Everything about it is ecological, etc. But he runs it, and you can go there and rent rooms, etc. That's the business he's running back in the sticks. That's his choice. But not everybody wants that, and different people are doing different things. In Ghana, in a sense, and I can always speak about Ghana because that's my experience, Ghana is a place that can be very forgiving. You can be hoity-toity, you can be down to earth, you can be middle of the road, you can find acceptance as to who you are. But one thing Ghanaians can't stand is if you think you're better than them. And then we have a saying, we'll show you pepper. You know, so that is what, in a sense, he has recognized that the husband, when he's saying that, learn the culture. There's one thing, if you offend a Ghanaian, you'll be sorry. And they don't necessarily tell you to your face. But they will work, before you get there, the door is shut and you don't know why. But you've offended somebody. So it's about that. It's about knowing where you're going, learning how the people roll, and then fitting in. It is not easy, but it's how it is. Madam?
Can I? Thank you for saying that, because that is worldwide.
Yeah.
And we need to move this on to somewhere a little further than we are at the moment. Yes, there's a lot of stuff that needs to be changed. And we can do it from today to start changing that. Like the chap said at the movie, that he don't have a degree. I don't have a degree either, but I live here in the UK. And I took a case from the Wilson County Court, Wilson Magistrate Court, all the way to the legal system here in the United Kingdom, to the European Court of Human Rights. All by myself, because I don't have money to pay a lawyer. So I've done that by myself. Recently, going back to 1945, because that's the history we're having here, back in 1945, there used to be a world disability handicap in the field of those people on the table, like in the room here. And the World Disability Handicap was there. Now World Disability Union is in Istanbul. And they're trying to spread out around the world as well. And we have people from Africa, quite a few people from Africa. What I'm trying to say is that at this point here, and this Brexit and these people losing the benefit as well. Here in the UK, lots of disabled people commit suicide because of what happened here. At this point, I'm looking at society and get somebody, work with people to get this type of case onto the European Court of Human Rights agenda before Brexit kicks in.
Okay.
And I need to talk to Coco, you all, later on about this, because it has to happen that we take issues straight along, not just one or two people. If you get over the threshold, because the threshold cost £150,000 to mount this year in the UK, now I don't know how much it's gone up since then, but there's a lot of money to mount the case, and not many people have this type of access at the moment. So we need to use that access to make change around the world. If we can do it, because it's a worldwide thing when it comes to especially black people.
Okay, so thank you for that. Now I have your question.
Yeah, just about the integration thing, I think the guy spoke about YouTube, and I see this YouTube channel about this black guy who went to Japan, and I think it's very interesting, the contrast between a black person going to Japan. I think the first thing they talk about is learning Japanese and how they have to go to school for 3 years and that, and they have to learn this very different culture to theirs. And I think it's at the center of the integration and trying things in Japan, even though realizing that going to a country which you've never been before, you're gonna have this discomfort. People are gonna be sometimes offended by your mannerisms, by your things, but you know, he's very passionate about it, and he's been living in Japan for about 4 years and that. And I think that I contrast it always with a lot of people going back to Africa, and I think that there's some sort of low expectations policy that is going on, that when you see, for example, Rastafarians that went back to Ethiopia, Shashamani, and I saw a documentary which was very sad because none of the people spoke Amharic or any of the Ethiopian languages, and they were living with each other, and you know, they were at least, and didn't go there, but at least in the documentary there was no intermarriages that were shown or anything that, you know, suggested to me that there was any sort of integrations, more of these people coming here and doing their own things, and then the other people doing their own thing, which I think, you know, me coming here to the UK, I'm expected to learn English, I'm expected to know a little bit about, you know, British cuisine and that. I think I would expect, if someone is coming to, you know, my part of Africa, I welcome them. If they're from Afro descendants, they're more than welcome. But I think that also they should be even if they're coming from another place in Africa and they come into my part of Africa, I expect them to do a little bit, try to know a bit of the language to get by, try a bit of the food, try to get a bit with the manners, and I think it's not something bad to expect that, but I think that, yeah, it's a bit sad when you see people going to Russia learning Russian as black people, but then when they go to Africa and live there and
nothing.
Yeah, but I think it's a mixture. I mean, thank you for your contribution. It's a point well made. But I think it's a mixture. You find that people moving back move in different ways. There's some who learn the language, some do not. There's some who, in fact, our nationality laws is changing, as kwaku said, with this return 2019. Our nationality law was clear. You don't speak a Ghanaian language, you don't get a Ghanaian passport. That used to be straight up. But partly because they want to accommodate the returnees, they're now making an exception to that rule. So there's maybe the drawback of that people don't necessarily mix. But in Ghana, with the number of languages, and we're not like Nigeria, we have even more. But the thing is, with the number of languages, sometimes it's hard to choose which one. Not saying that you shouldn't, but I'm just saying that therefore that's why people are making those compromises. But also, in terms of culture, there isn't one Ghanaian culture. There are a number. And it's about what is it that we, kwaku has a play, which has been done there. The play is very funny and it's interesting. It's about this African and Caribbean dichotomy. And people, and it's set in a voluntary organization. And they've chosen a name like Sankofa. And yet, the Caribbean don't seem to understand that Sankofa is a tree word. It means go back and get. That's what it means. And it's interesting. So that clash, that culture clash, Africa and Caribbean, is sort of portrayed in that. What is striking about that, there was one sentence in that play where one of them said, yeah, you didn't come look for we. So after, so you never came to look for us. So that is an undying problem. And in the play, what comes out is, because after the play there's a discussion, somebody here, Madingo, he calls himself an African from Jamaica. And he said actually he knows of a place in Uganda where they actually went to search for their relatives that were lost. And they even have a celebration every year. And that's the complexity of Africa. There are unresolved issues, and there are all sorts of problems with our family who are out there and our family who want to go home. So it's about compromises. So yeah, I'll bring you in, but I'm just saying it's about compromises, because the going home, maybe for a lot of people, it's part of the reparations. They need to be able to come home. But coming home is one thing. Learning to live together is another. And so we have to make that adjustment. It's not, and I can understand the question from Rumbi about, well, is this who we want? We want all sorts, because the human family. No, let me just finish.
Not about who we want.
No, I said we want.
How we want it.
No, let me then. How I heard your question or your comment, it's about we want the complexity of our human family, because there's no one that fits. It's about what is needed, and on the content, what I'll say is that sometimes you need some of those people, because there are some of our own people at home who are dislocated, and it's about each of us finding that earth thing and knowing we're home. So I'll bring you in, and then I think we'll be kicked out of here in a few minutes.
No, I don't want to.
Yeah?
Yeah, I'll just give an example. Like, for example, here in the UK, if you want to have citizenship, you have to put English or Welsh test. And I think in Switzerland, for example, there are 4 languages. So one of the languages, you don't have to do all, even only one of the languages, and you have a B2 level, then you can apply for citizenship. Also, for example, in Austria, then they ask you about the locality where you are based. Do you know about the history of that place? Do you know the history of that? And I think it's very important for people that, yes, you're more than welcome, but they should be in effort. Same way that if I move to the Caribbean, I will expect myself to do the effort to understand a culture that I don't know. And I think that is just fair.
But you need to also remember that our official language in Ghana is English. That is another of our issues. So it is the official language. It's the language of business, it's the language of schools, it's the language of everything. So that is the complexity when you're dealing with these colonized entities. That it isn't, we don't have one language. So that is our official language. Although up till now, you had to learn a Ghanaian language in order to get the thing. And then after you finish, we just need to close up.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank you all for this wonderful opportunity for this evening to hear so many people that are helping and looking forward, helping Africa and doing things in different parts of Africa. It was really refreshing. And I'm from Jamaica. And I've I want to go back to Africa. I'm not sure what part of Africa. And I think listening to the people on the thing made it seemed a bit easier. But I was also thinking about language, going back to any African country. How am I going to get along? But I think if you go with the right spirit,
it's the attitude.
And the attitude to just be humble and try to, well, I haven't done it, but this is my idea, and I don't know how it's going to work, but just be humble and willing to learn.
And for those who are in politics, when you are trying to write a speech or something, it's nice to be able to quote, our own. I mean, this is a Pan-African event. It's about people who are African. And what I love about it is, even today as I was coming, there's a chapter on Africa. And it's interesting that Paul Robeson actually said, I discovered Africa in London. So since he said that, it is still something for us all to think about. That in a sense, maybe our sense of being African and being concerned for our continent sometimes comes from a place like this. You're living in this place, and we're, in fact, whether you know it or you're just bundled together, we're very conscious of who we are when we're back home. But it's nice to know that, so we're African. Well, if you don't know, they'll tell you. And you can hide behind different labels, but you are African. So I just, and I'll end with a quote. It's a proverb, which I think we should capture, because Africa has beautiful proverbs. There's one from the Congo where they say that no matter how long a log has been in water, it doesn't become a crocodile. So whether people know it or not, they are African. Whether they call themselves African or not, we know they're African. So as African brothers and sisters, I'm glad that we've come here, and that together we'll discover something about looking to Africa. Because the hostile environment, I'll be honest, the hostile environment has been going on for years. But it crashed into public view recently, thanks to our dear Theresa May, who used to be Home Secretary. But she's not the first to have done it, and it's something that we've been living with. But we need to start being smart about what we can do and how we can get, how we can make the best of our resources, and especially the human beings. We are the greatest resource. Brother Glenroy, we've done introductions. Can you tell people who you are? Yeah, before Kwaku starts that. Yeah, okay, in a few seconds.
Roy Watson, I'm a trade unionist on the railway, but I'm also a Pan-Africanist and the secretary of the Global African Congress, which is a reparation organization. I think that's enough.
Thank you.
Taking care of that section. Thank you. She's one lady that supports our events, and I call upon her when, circumstances demand it. I'm going to play a little thing. I'm not going to play the whole thing, it's 10 minutes, but to give a flavor, because I don't know if you guys are aware, but Ghana has declared 2019 Year of Return. So there's going to be a whole year worth of program in Ghana. So what I can do is maybe zoom up a bit to this, because I can give the link. This link is on the internet. So it was launched in Washington a few months ago.
Will be in the forefront of galvanizing and cementing this wonderful relationship between the nation of the United States of America, the people of the United States of America, and the great Republican nation of Ghana, with this wonderful President and First Lady who is leading us into the 21st and 22nd century. May the blessings of all be upon you. Let us be connected through our ancestry and the spirits, and let us never forget the dark passage which will turn into the light of return in this wonderful year of 2019, commemorating our first venture in 1619. God bless all of you. God bless Ghana, and God bless the United States of America.
That we, as Africans, have the spirit of resilience. We are here for a purpose, to tell the story. So those who have lost hope will see that they're still alive for a reason. There are young people on substances that have no business being on. It's because they have lost their way. You and I will use this occasion under the auspices of His Excellency, the President of the Republic of Ghana, who has opened the doors for you and I to tell the story of the resilience of our people.
We're gathered to initiate the year of commemoration of one of the most momentous events of history, the commencement of the transatlantic trade, slave trade, which brought tens of millions of Africans to the Americas, North, Central, and South. We know of the horrors that accompanied that forced journey. We know of the brutalities that were meted out to them during their stay in the Americas. We know of the great difficulties they have encountered in attempting to assimilate and live and maintain their dignity in the Americas. We know of the extraordinary achievements and contributions they have made to the life of the Americas. And it is important that in this symbolic year, 400 years later, we commemorate their existence and their sacrifices. It was in anticipation of the year of commemoration that my great childhood friend, colleague and associate, late Jake Otanka Obecha-Bilamti, then Minister of Tourism in President John Ajikun Kufuor's government, a government of which I was part as Foreign Minister, launched in celebration of Ghana's Golden Jubilee, the Joseph Project.
I'm going to stop it there because I can give you the link, but what you want to take from it is that Ghana has got something called Right of Abode, and it's for all diasporans. So it welcomes African people in the diaspora to come back. And if you watch the beginning of the video, it tells you a bit more about it. You can set up businesses and whatever. And you don't have to have citizenship to do that. And if you want citizenship too, it's been made easy since the last regime. I think about a few dozen African Americans and mainly African Caribbeans were granted Ghanaian citizenship about a couple of years ago. So that's the process of welcoming our brothers and sisters in the diaspora. So 2019 is the year of the return. And obviously, this is very Americentric, but we're trying to make sure that it's African, global African, rather than just for the Americans. So indeed, I'm trying to facilitate the opportunity for the Ghana government or the people running this project to meet people like you here, because I'm sure a lot of us will be interested in participating in some of the events. One of the events that we'll be doing is Panafest, and I do remember going to Panafest, I think either 1994 or 1996. So that is on the agenda of a whole raft of events that they'll be doing in Ghana. So I'm happy to send the links to these things in a moment. So that is me down for that, so we can just close that. So anyway, welcome, how are you? Yeah, okay, good. So we're just gonna kick off, So that's if this thing will just go into what it's supposed to do. Yeah, so actually, I've got my great prizes now, I've got my fun prizes, because it's not just about me talking, it's about engaging people. So when you see a title like Hostile Environment, Look to Africa, what marker, what person comes to mind? Sometimes, the people are not rushing to answer. I thought people raise their hand. If you have the answer, raise your hand. But what comes to mind? Because I didn't just throw this title together. Obviously, it's in the context of the Windrush. I'll talk about that. But what comes to mind? Okay, no problem. There's a shame because
there's a hand up here.
Yeah. But there's a hand up?
Yeah.
Where?
Here.
Yeah, go ahead, my friend.
Well, when I saw that, and that's what brought.
Yeah, quickly, I just want a name, because we are out of time. So, what name? I say it's a person, so just give me the name of the person.
No, I just thought about myself.
Oh, good. Oh, okay, that's fine. No, the title is Marcus Garvey, but you're not going to prize because you didn't raise your hand for me to pick your. Oh, hold on.
It's not moving.
No. Yeah, so it doesn't go on these things, but that's Marcus Garvey's book, The Philosophy and Opinions of Marcus Garvey. So that's where it comes from. But if you booked and you went on the booking website, you know that we're saying, what do you want to live in Britain? Go back to Africa or the Caribbean. So it's not just focused on the continent. And there's the options for people that want to live here as well. But even if we can't live here, we've got to be mindful, what structure do we have to empower us to resist the hostile environment, because it is a hostile environment for some. Yes.
Yeah, can I ask you, where do we get the name the hostile environment?
Okay, I think it came from the Home Secretary at that time saying we're going to create a hostile environment for people, not illegals. It was meant for illegals not to find a footing in Britain. So that's where it comes from.
Wasn't it? Sorry,
Okay.
sorry, Kwaku. Wasn't it from Labour?
No, I didn't say it's from Labour. The idea is from Labour, but the term hostile environment, as far as I'm concerned, came from the Conservative Coalition Party in the sentence that we're going to create a hostile environment. But this goes back a long way, pre-Conservatives. But she asked me a specific question, where the hostile environment term comes from. That's what I was responding to. Thank you very much. But if you don't mind, I really want to whiz through this because I'm mindful of time management. So that's where this comes from. So actually I bought this, so let's see if it works. It doesn't seem to work. And made an effort to get it. Okay, so that's the program. Unfortunately, it's not easy to see in there, but I'm going to do my bit. We're going to have golden minutes. Then we're going to have a section where we've got some special guests who are going to speak to topics of their expertise. And if you book, it's all online. So the program is online for you to see, so I'm not going to spend too much time there. Then when they finish, I've programmed in almost an hour of a plenary, and I call it the Garvey Cipher, where you just discuss things. So they'll be here, or some of them will be here, and you can either ask a question or make a comment. So it's not just about them, it will also be about us, the participants in here. You good?
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm mindful that as you make up the time, so we can do all those things we want to do. And I'm very, very upset because give me a moment. I'm not sure why this is supposed to work and make my life easy.
It is working.
Is it? No, but is it going to be the right way? Yeah, I think it's going the right way. Fantastic. Then I'm not tied to this stuff. Okay, so that's me, blah, 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 what I do. BTWLC, African History Revisitors, so we do community things, we do history things, we do a whole range of things. Right. So you said it's working. Yeah? Oh, yeah, okay. Yeah. So this is the program we're doing, and I think I've said about it. So you know what you didn't just walk off the street. This is what you came for. Okay. So, this comes from this week's paper. So, we know about the hostile environment and the so-called Windrush scandal. By the way, I don't call it Windrush scandal. By 6 months on, so this was an article in The Guardian saying 6 months on, pretty much nothing has changed. Do you remember 6 years on, both the Home Secretary and the Prime Minister said how this thing is going to be dealt with, processing things in 2 weeks, nobody's going to be deported and stuff. Do you remember?
Yeah.
6 years on, people that should not be caught in that dragnet are still in that situation.
6 months.
6 months on, yeah. So, yeah, that shows you pay attention. 6 months on, still happening. My man here told us about him coming from a Pakistani immigrant family.
Yeah.
Sometimes we say we want an African. It's not an African, it's about what their core values are. So we've got an immigrant, and he is overseeing the deportations and hostile situations for fellow immigrants. Okay. Right. I'll talk about that later. This is my grip box. In fact, anybody know the grip case? Anybody know of grip cases?
No. Yeah.
Okay. When these guys came those days, we don't have all these fancy trolleys. You have the grip case. So that's my grip case. And there are a few things that I will pick up from. But why am I showing this? On here, I went to an event, right, at the V&A, and they're doing grip workshop on grip cases. So they've got all the images of the countries from the Caribbean. But I wanted to make the point that when you talk about this so-called Windrush scandal, it's not just about the Caribbean, it's about the Commonwealth.
Yeah.
So that's what I call the Commonwealth and Windrush scandal. It's nothing to do just people came with Windrush or people from the Caribbean. It's about the Commonwealth, including European, Canadians, and Australians. Maybe not to the same extent as Africans, but they are still in the same boat, right? So that's why I call it the Commonwealth and Windrush scandal. Okay. That is a letter, and it's a shame. Someone booked, and she's not here because she insists that it's about, oh, the Caribbean experience. No. Don Butler's letter to the Prime Minister within the week of April, when this exposed, said, yesterday in Parliament, we heard the reality of the hostile environment which you created for people from the Commonwealth. Did it say the Caribbean?
No.
Very specific. It's a shame that person's in here, because I wanted her to know this. If you look at the government documents, they call it the Windrush situation, but if you look at the actual document, it's talking about the Commonwealth. It does not focus on the Caribbean. So I'm not going to belabor the point it's been made. Okay. Now, how bad is it? It's so bad that that is one of the orders that you get. And this was given to a 6-year-old girl. Oh, that she has to leave. British born, and she's got that. Can you imagine the stress? Even if it's resolved, the stress you have to go through. Sometimes hiring a lawyer and stuff. A 6-year-old girl, that's how bad it is. Okay, this is an image marking Windrush, 70 years on. I mean, it's interesting, it's a shame you can't see, but this idea of we're invited, you have to come to one of my programs, and I've got a book coming out later this month. They were invited. I can categorically tell you that no one on Windrush was invited. No one was invited. We've conflated what happened in the 50s with what happened in 1948. Okay.
Yep. Right.
I really have to go through that. Hold your question, because if not, things can sort of like drag. I'm mindful. Okay, so 1948, also the connection that we make with Empower Windrush and the 48 Nationality Bill is 10 years, because there's no connection. That bill became an act in July, so that bill became an act after Windrush arrived. And it did not come into effect until 1st January 1949. So it's got nothing to do with the Empower Windrush passengers. What stopped people coming before were British? Even if you didn't have the 1948 Act, you could still come. The 1948 Act was doing more than just immigration. It was to align the Commonwealth, so you could have a Commonwealth citizenship and still be part of a British citizenship. That was what that was about. But when our people, and you know, as a Pan-Africanist, I'm talking about our people, meaning both from the continent or from the diaspora, started coming in droves. In the 50s, they started talking about what to do. In the end of 1962, the first act to limit us was this: Commonwealth immigrants. You see? They didn't say Caribbean immigrants, Commonwealth immigrants. We're all caught to that, 62. That means you had to have a work voucher, you had to have a working place before you came to Britain. Before you could come, you could settle, no problem. But now, this is how they start chipping at our numbers in here. Okay, 68. Then comes 68.
You
All of a
said
sudden,
48 that they didn't have to have a work permit.
no, before 62, you didn't have to. I'm glad somebody's taking notes. But this is not meant to be a lecture, by the way. It's just to give you a quick overview, but still it's great. So, come 68, you remember that, ooh, in East Africa, my people there are saying we're becoming now Africanized. And they had issues with the Asians there, right? So they got, I can say there was a hostile environment in East Africa for the Asians. So some say, ooh, I've got my British passport, because the deal was that they could retain their British passport. When they look at the thousands of Asians that were going to decamp in Britain, less than a week, this Act of 68 was passed, ostensibly to stop the Asians, even though they had that piece of paper that's a British passport. They said, oh, do you have a parent who was born in Britain, or a grandparent who was born in Britain? Oh, you don't? Then sorry, it's not really worth much. So that passport did not give you automatic entry into Britain as a consequence of 68. Then 71. Now Britain is trying to get into the EU. So some of the things that they looked at was to make sure that us in here would have the rights to be able to go to Europe and be British or whatever it is. Obviously, there were some more constraints. So you have 71. And now, when you look at the so-called Commonwealth and Windrush scandal situation, the Windrush generation that they're talking about, it's not just the people that came in the 40s and 50s. It extends to everyone that came before 73. Because this 71 Act capped it at December 72. So that means anyone that came after, this act is catching them. Right. So when the government's looking at all these things, they're saying, if you came before, then come and give us your documents and we'll regularize your stuff. If you came after, that's a whole issue. So what's happening is that a few people who didn't, and I hope Jackie gets here, I got a late confirmation from Jackie McKenzie, a lawyer that's supposed to speak, and she's doing a lot of the Windrush campaign stuff. And so, yeah, so that is the significance of the 71 Act. Just remember that it came into effect 1st January the following year. No, 73, sorry. Okay, then now we start getting to what the basis for the so-called hostile environment, because we get a conservative Lib Dem coalition government, we get 2010 Immigration Act, tough, followed quickly by 2014. Now, we are all supposed to be bodyguards. You want to rent a house, you want to see your paper, you want a job, you want to see a paper. And that is why we started having people who had settled here for decades having the issue they're having. Because the doctor says, where's your paper? People who've been in work, your boss says, where's your paper? And people are losing their jobs, losing their homes, losing their benefits and stuff. So that is a Windrush. That's how we came by this Windrush stuff. Now, let me tell you something. This is a document. Initially, I was going to let Nana read it, but it's so small, there's no point. Right? I've been looking into the archives, the cabinet people, right? And this is something that happened in 49. I'm mindful of time. You know something? I'll jump over. Because there was a hostile environment to make things difficult. And they were saying that we're going to use this thing that came pre-42, where you had to show that you're British. It was meant for people like the seamen and whatever. Before, seamen didn't necessarily have passports, but they made it difficult that now, because jobs were needed for the Europeans, they wanted to cut down the so-called colour. And I'll talk about the colour in a moment. I'm using the language of the day because it's relevant to that period. So there's some documents that you can see, cabinet documents. So the Home Office, the Colonial Office, the Ministry for Labour, they met and decided, what can we do to limit the immigration of colored people? That's the language they used to use in those days. So people are looking and saying, talk about 1948. 1948 was not an immigration bill, but an immigration bill. The first act that was made to cut our immigration was this, the Alien Act 1905. It was really meant to stop the tide of European Jewish people coming. Right? And then in 1919, they even had another one. So that's the start of immigration policy. This thing is not great. Now, for us, you need to know about this. Special restrictions, or better known as Colored Alien Seamen Order, 1925. War is over. People have come back to Britain, particularly in the seaports. There's competition for work. All these Africans are taking our jobs. So we get to a state where the Home Office creates this document to give it a hostile environment for non-Europeans to prove their identity, or nationality. And this, they not only catch people, let's talk about, since I focused on Africans, this did not only catch African Caribbeans, but actually caught Africans born in Britain. Because if you're born in Britain, you don't necessarily have to have the passport. You understand what I'm saying? You think most of the people, the Cockney people in Islam have got passports, they're not traveling. So that caught people who were actually born here, who could call themselves British. Right, so this is, you can see, very racist. It's colored. So not Europeans. So the Germans that they fought, this did not apply to them to some extent. It applied to us, the colored people. maybe I should take this thing back because I was going to recent clearly it's rubbish.
Is your battery good?
Okay.
Battery.
No, it's fairly new. It's fairly new. What am I in here? Okay, so this is talking about the color in inside. And since I'm a bit of a hurry, I'll just leave that. Oh, I'm not very impressed. Maybe it's going to tie me down to this place. I have no choice. Right, okay. Now, in 1807, I'm sure you all remember, what act did we mark? The 200th anniversary of what? Come on, it's on the board. Quickly.
Abolition of the Slave Trade Act.
It wasn't abolition of slavery, it was abolition of slavery, or what we call the trafficking.
Yeah.
Right. People had parties. I remember there was a football match in it. There was a ball celebrating this. But if they're taking time to actually read the act, you know what you find in there? And I think that's probably one of the first, not the first, but one of the first racist acts, because it was enshrined in law. This is an act. It said that Negroes that fought in the King's Army were not entitled to pension on discharge. So you could go and fight for king and country and be killed, that's fine. But if you are maimed and you are discharged, you're not entitled to pension. And this is put in an act that is supposed to be helping the Africans. It did not lift enslavement, but at least it stopped the trafficking. That's what's in there. How racist can you get? So sometimes we have to go to a nitty-gritty to find out what these things that are supposed to be doing good for us actually mean. Okay, so this is a lady, you may or may not have come across it. Anybody heard of the Queen Elizabeth's first proclamations?
Yeah.
1596 and 1601. Well, the popular version is that Queen Elizabeth said, oh, there are too many Negroes in my realm, so we need to kick them off. So she had this proclamation. Not quite. No one ever left Britain. First of all, now the position is that she didn't do this. This was put together by her Privy Council. And the idea was that some British people had been caught in the war. You know, they had a war with Spain. So this guy counts, I think he's a Dutch guy, goes over and gets about 90 of them, brings them to Britain or frees them. So he's got to be paid. So somebody got a bright idea. Oh, because there's so many of these Africans around London. I was thinking about Britain, but mainly London. Let's round them up, and then he can go and take them and sell them. Remember, this is enslavement or trafficking period, right? So that's the idea. Well, the point is this. You had to have the permission of the so-called enslavers. And no enslaver in Britain wanted to give up his enslaved Africans, so no one was ever deported. So it's worth noting, because the popular version is that some Africans were deported because of these proclamations. So quickly, I really am not impressed with this. Yeah, so this is the draft. The draft actually was never published, but obviously someone wrote it. That's the 1601. It was never published. Quickly, okay. Yeah, I've got a book on now. That's what I told you about. Look how far we've come. Disrupting African British history narratives in question mark. That covers some of these areas. Okie doke. So I think you know something. I've pretty much finished. So that was to give you a background. So when we're talking about the hostile environment, don't think that it's a recent thing. Don't think that it starts in 2010. I think I had some image I wanted to show you, because when these things were being debated, we didn't bother. Oh, okay. When these things were debated, we didn't bother. So let me just run quickly and see if I can find it. If not, I'll just leave it. Oh, no. You have to read something. Okay. But you read it
Hello, everyone.
No, I don't need that.
Which
okay.
You want me to read?
No, not now. During the section, the golden minutes. So that's me pretty done. The only thing I thought the main image was there is Emacs. Anybody know what Emacs? I think it's to do with xenophobia. So the people who are against xenophobia, right? That's 2010. There were a couple of marches, and they said this Immigration Act is coming. And I went to one or two of the meetings, and I have to say, I hardly saw our people there. So it's the liberal Europeans there shouting about this. Because most of the Africans were sitting comfortable and said, I've got a British passport, or I'm British. My grandfather came here in 1948 or 1955, I'm British. So it's them. they thought the act is going to affect them. So never campaign, and that is why how many Labour MPs voted against six out of hundreds of MPs, because they thought, oh, it's going to impact on them, whoever they are, but not us, British. And now it goes to the extent that people die, people are deported, or people go on holiday or funeral and they can't come back.
Or they can't have cancer treatment.
Yeah, because we're not mindful of these things. So sometimes you've got to be mindful of politics. Politics affects us. And if we be maybe a bit more vociferous in our shouting this down, it may not have happened. But nevertheless, we are where we are. So I think that's me done. Thank you very much. Hello. Do I take it that kwaku is done? So we're going for golden minutes. So Sister Nagaa is here, so you can kick off with Sister Nagaa.
I've been always looking to Africa, because when I left Africa, I was aware of underdevelopment, misuse of resources, poverty, and it was hurting me. When I came here, I enjoyed lots of privilege and a stable life, but I was always thinking and looking to Africa, what can I do to help my nation? What can I do to help my people? And I tried different things. I tried different businesses. I tried different charities. And finally, we succeeded in building a trust called Abdelmajid Educational Trust. The aim of the trust is to support education and raise awareness. Supporting education is by supporting schools, find necessities. We started a small project in Sudan. We experimented it, and it was a graduation project of an engineer, a graduate engineer. He said to provide cool water, you need to make, like, he called it a natural fridge or a people's fridge. It's because we have electricity cuts and things like that, fridges were not helpful to help with water in the schools. So he designed a well. The well will be built with bricks, red bricks with square holes and pipes, and this is linked to taps, and this the well cools itself. The bricks and the
you don't have to be so close. Yeah.
Okay. The bricks help in cooling the water, so the water comes cool, cold, and clean to the pupils. And we implemented this project into 2 schools, and it was very good. In one school, it provided cold, clean water to 300 pupils, and in another school more than that. So by working in Abdelmajid Education Trust, we are aiming to support, to continue building water projects, continue supporting schools with equipment, sponsoring children who can't continue their education because of poverty or lack of resources. And we are always looking to Africa, from Sudan, where we wish to expand to other African nations.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I'll play this. It's fantastic. 2 minutes.
And when you challenged me on Windrush, Britain stopped deporting its own nationals to Australia in 1868. How can it be right when we had a generation of people that arrived here from the Caribbean that gave this country so much that you strip them of their rights? You deport them, you detain them, you deny them access to pensions, to healthcare, and that is not something that should animate and make people furious that this has happened in Britain's name. Of course, and let me just say, these are the descendants of enslaved people that was done by this country. It is horrendous, And of course it has animated me because this included my parents and our generation, but it is part of a rhetoric. And it's a rhetoric around immigration, it's a rhetoric around difference, it's not consistent with a civilized democracy, and we should call it what it is. You do not get to say that you're going to have trade deals with the world and then treat the world's population that arrives here because of your colonial past in such an atrocious way.
Do you believe, looking at politics today, that there is institutional racism in, for example, the Home Office, which of course was the department responsible for the Windrush decisions? Do you believe, when you look at policing in London today, that there is institutional racism?
Racism and discrimination exists in Britain, of course it does. I do believe that the Windrush is an example of systemic discrimination against low-hanging fruit, which was British nationals who ultimately were subjects because of empire, treated as they were because of the colour of their skin. That is my sincere belief.
Okay, so that's up 2 minutes, and that's the point I want to make. You say a lot, so let's be mindful of golden minutes. So I think it's Awula Serwah now. Can you hold it? Awula Serwah, you're supposed to make your presentation?
Yes, good afternoon, everybody. I want to talk about what's going on in Ghana. It's happening in Ghana. Looking to Ghana, which is obviously in Africa, there's a lot of protests going on. And one that excited me when I was in Ghana a few months ago was this company known as Nelplast. And because I'm really concerned about the environment, I'm excited about what they do because they recycle plastics, all kinds of plastics apart from PVC pipes, into building materials. And they are trying to be the regional leader in Africa in terms of recycling plastics. So they have a website that one can go on, but I've been to the factory, I've seen what they do. And another thing that they do is that they are located in a not very, shall I say, rich part of Accra, in Ashama. And what they do is that they encourage you, you can collect plastics, bring it to them, they weigh it, and then you are paid for the plastics that you brought. And you hear testimony of some people who tell you that that has helped them to pay school fees and things like that, which I think is very good. So they're doing two things. They're helping clean up Accra by getting people to collect discarded plastics. And in addition...
Can you move back a bit? So, yeah,
to get discarded plastics, and in addition, they are turning the waste into a useful product, which is building materials. Thanks.
On email, because I circulated this event, a brother that lives in Namibia, or how to say, this African Caribbean, he lived in England for quite a while, and he's a Rastafarian, obviously Pan-Africanist, want to make a contribution. So that's what he's got, and since Nana is good at reading, I would like Nana to read it.
Okay. It is clear from the first time I visited Africa back in the 70s as a youth, it was a place I wanted to live. Naturally, as time went by and our knowledge increased of the significance of not simply being an African, but to physically make the return to enable and empower young people and people in general. My motives are many. Very simply, Africans in the diaspora need to talk and walk in the same direction at the same time. They need to identify innovation and new technologies, support small-scale projects on the continent in all 55 states. The whole continent is ours. The fact that the current regimes in the 55 states do not recognize historical diaspora, contrary to popular belief, is not an excuse to not assist or participate, live, work, support our continent. These factors did not deter I and should not undermine anyone. Whether one wants to live in Europe, North America, the Caribbean, etc., here is the key issue. Other nations with microscopic affinity are moving here in vast numbers, whilst Africans in the diaspora are running around without actual physical investment in the continent. In fact, one of the major issues facing us now, which very few brothers and sisters in the diaspora, and much less on our continent, are aware, is that China will relocate 200 million of its population into Africa by the year 2020. This information has been around for the past decade or more, yet 40 months away, and many cannot see that it is taking place under their watch. Indeed, already 37 states are signed up with this new scramble. Make no mistake, it's happening as you read these few words. Moving to Africa should not be an individual thing. No other nation does this. Yet that is what I want to do. On top of this, all the red tape and nonsense barriers in our way to returning to our motherland, considering millions were kidnapped victims who left without exit or entry papers. Yet today, the 55 stooges or misleaders who run our continent are maintaining those set artificial boundaries, which invaders and mass murderers from Europe put up in 1881 onwards. I decided to return home, in spite of these tremendous challenges, and support the war effort or liberation of our continent. From time to time, we ask for support from our sisters and brothers in the diaspora, yet got nothing. Many refer you to the same enslavers' charities. Ironic. We invited others to come take a look and see how they can play a role in the delivery of services to our people. But alas, many cannot find the time. What most Africans today have forgotten due to the Indo-European religious false belief, be it Islam, Judaism, or Christianity, is our Ubuntu energy matter vibration. I am because we are, and because we are, I am. Many don't know that one tree cannot make a forest. One soldier cannot make an army. Like any army, you require supplies to keep the enemies away. I am happy that I'm in the motherland and will continue to invite conscious sisters and brothers to come and take a look. Do not just go to the usual places, the West or East Africa. Travel all over and look. In Southern Africa, where I'm located, every infrastructure is in place. It's also the area where 60% of the world mineral reserves are to be found. Love and light.
Thank you. Okay, so look at the program. We seem to have caught up.
Tehuti. Tehuti.
Thank you very much.
Tehuti.
Okay. Yeah, we're making good time. So you know what I'm going to do? I like to swing things around, not always be doing the obvious thing. So all they say is Dr. Adotey, Onyekachi, Wambu, Akosua, Annabel, John, and Saffy Christian, also known as the native Bourne family, and Dr. Evelyn Mensah. I'm not going to go by that list, by that order. So,
okay.
It's Onyekachi. Yeah, okay. So you can come here, you can talk from there. I think it's better if you come over here so we can all see since you're making a formal presentation. Yeah, it's your space now.
Can I talk from here?
Yeah. You can.
Okay, no, don't ask me. The audience, do you prefer to talk from here, from there, or here? It's up to you.
I prefer in front.
Well, you're told to move.
Otherwise, we see his back.
Yeah, okay.
You was here told.
Website of the organization, so you can go and find out what they do afford or the rest. Adotey, you doing ACU, I have ACU thing on there. Yeah, once the green comes, you fine.
Okay, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Everybody. And thank you for the invitation. I'm the Executive Director of Afford, an organization that supports Africans here to do development in Africa. We're already doing a lot of development. People send money, people share their skills, people are lobbying politically, so we know that Africans here are doing an enormous amount. But what we're trying to see is if we can do all of that better. We send money home, $60 billion in the last year to try and make some change. We do that and make sure relatives have school fees, make sure we send medicines and everything else. But after a while, that kind of small-scale help is not enough, because in as much as we send money for the school fees, if the school is terrible, the child's not going to get a good education. And as much as we send money for the health care, if there's there's one clinic in the village and it's got no drugs, things don't happen. So after a while, we have to do more than just keep sending the bits that we're sending. And what we're trying to look at is, can we do much more structured interventions that have bigger impact. In terms of the subject, I think it's unhelpful for the reasons that Kwaku did, to just look at this current issue of hostile environment and whether Africa is an option. Africa has always been an option. The work that we do at Afford, we take our cue from Ekweno, who started the Sons of Africa, back at the end of the 18th century. And he started that because he was dealing with an emergency in Africa, which was the slave trade. And the Sons of Africa who were here wanted to do that. So there's always been a concern, and there's always, as Kwaku very rightly said, if you go back to 1595 and 1601, there's always been a hostile environment. And it's never an issue of here or there. It's, we've been, the reason that Queen Elizabeth I was kicking off the first documented hostile environment was because this country was becoming an empire and wanted a global trading empire. And it traded all kinds of terrible things, including enslaved Africans. But and there was a global system of trading, so you cannot really, and we've been part of that system since, for 400 over 400 years, as the Ghanaian president said in the clip. So these hostile environments will come and they'll go because they're a function of that empire. That empire, as we know, famously always wants to have its cake and to eat it, as we are now going through with Brexit. So, every time there is a pressure, you'll get the same thing. So from Queen Elizabeth in 1601, you go forward to Ekweno's sons and the Sons of Africa, where they wanted, again, at the end of the 18th century, to send a whole load of people back to Sierra Leone. And the current Freetown settlement was settled from people from here who were evacuated from the streets of London at the end of the 18th century, and then others who then joined them from Nova Scotia, who had fought on the side of the Americans in the war for independence, who had been abandoned in Nova Scotia at the end of when the British lost that war, and then others who had been coming round the coast of Africa, and the British Navy ships had stopped them and dumped them in Sierra Leone. So there is a pattern to all of this, and we have been part of this and entangled in this for 400 years. And what we have to be doing is to be thinking and operating much more cleverly than we have been within that structure, and playing to the strengths that we have. In the same way that for 400 years since Queen Elizabeth, people have been talking about deporting all soul from this country. It's not going to happen because the contradictions are too many. Britain wants to trade, and in order to trade, one of the things that happens during trade is that people will move around. And so you'll always get these spasms, and I don't think it's an either or. It's about how we, who are stuck inside of this construction, begin to work much more effective transnational businesses, so that our businesses here and our businesses in Ghana or elsewhere on the continent are linked. Our efforts here, our efforts in Somalia are linked, and we are operating so that the value in that chain or that line benefits us all. The people who run wonderful transnational businesses at the moment are generally tend to be Western multinationals. And in the same way that most of us are not going to kick them out of our countries, I don't think in the end successfully they'll kick us out of here. Yes, at the edges, all this hysteria and policies will happen and, you know, people will be affected and it will be a tragedy for those peoples. But what I'm trying to understand is the broader picture. And we have to fight those indignities and those small-scale attempts to remove us and the impact that it has on people's lives. But the bigger picture is that, you know, to be honest, most of us are not going anywhere. And if we're not going anywhere, what are we then doing to make those connections much more effectively with the places that we have a connection with? And that includes building, you know, the skills, like enabling the transfer of those skills, enabling transfer of money, and enabling the transfer of goods and services from where we come from. And we see Afford as trying to really help with a lot of that. As I said, I'm going to end with the issue of remittances. We send a lot of money back to our countries of origin. The reason I got involved with Afford was that in 2000 I was reading, I think it was on allafrica.com, the newspaper online newspaper, and I saw that Western Union were about to celebrate being in Nigeria for 9 years, and they were throwing a big party in Lagos. And at the time I'm thinking, why is Western Union throwing a big party in Lagos? They were spending a lot of money in this party, and I thought, I didn't really understand it. And I dug in a little bit deeper, and I discovered that in the 9 years that Western Union had been in Nigeria, the Nigerian abroad had remitted 27 billion through Western Union. So that's about 3 billion a year, you know, from what was quite a, you know, and is still quite a poor country, that Western Union had gone in and taken out of that country. From that 27 billion, in those days, the commission rates were about 10 to 15%. Let's work on the lower level of that commission rate. So, and say 10%. So in 29 years, 27 billion, Western Union had walked out of Nigeria with 2.7 billion in profit. But here's the joke. Most of these money transfer businesses actually make their money from exchange rate, not the commission. So Western Union probably walked out of Nigeria with $6 billion. And what's their business model? Their business model is that everybody else carries their costs because they work through small operators, so they don't pay overheads. They put a sign up here, and they put a sign up where you collect the remittance. So out of that 6 billion, they probably only invested, you know, if you're lucky, $500 million. The rest was pure profit. And they walk into the Nigerian market and they walk out with 6 billion. What are the Nigerian banks doing? What are the... So for me, those are the bigger questions, because other people are running very successful transnational businesses. And yes, what's happened under the hostile environment is a tragedy, but the bigger, we're losing sight of the bigger issue here, which is that we are involved in a transnational line and there are transnational opportunities, and we have been, and we know why for 400 years we haven't been able to participate effectively and all of that. But on paper now we're all free. Yeah? So can we raise the game? Thank you.